Chapter 101 I am invincible in naval battles, what? Drag. Although the large dark green hood covered his face, Durag grew up in the Navy, plus the unique devil fruit ability in this sea. Zhongguo and Sakaski recognized him immediately. They reacted quickly and turned their heads to stare at Darren at the same time. Darren, this guy, is still in contact with the traitor, Durag. Hey, don't look at me like that. Darren shrugged indifferently and smiled. Our Navy urgently needs to win this war, isn't it? After hearing this, Sengoku and Sakaski fell silent. Yes. The Navy is now facing extremely heavy political pressure, and this battle can only win and not lose. And they have to admit the fact that, as far as naval battles are concerned, Dragon's devil fruit ability is definitely enough to be among the strongest. You know, when Marshal Kong gave Dragon the nature wind fruit, he was training him as a future Navy Marshal to make up for the Navy's lack of naval battle capabilities. At that time, Marshal Kong's expectation for Dragon was that he hoped he could exert the power of the wind fruit and fight against Golden Lion and Whitebeard in naval battles. So, is this your trump card, Darren? Sengoku looked at Darren deeply, his face extremely serious, and asked in a deep voice. Trumpet. Darren smiled. Maybe, but this is no longer important. Perhaps Dorig's appearance here has nothing to do with me. Maybe he just wants to help the Navy solve the current dilemma and use his devil fruit ability to repay the Navy's kindness in training him. Who knows about this kind of thing? Zhongguo couldn't help rolling his eyes when he heard what this kid said. But he was too lazy to bother with Darren. Keeping secret contact with the traitor and criminal, Dorig did violate the discipline of the military. Under normal circumstances, he must be severely punished or even demobilized. But in the current situation, Zhongguo can no longer care about so much. There is no doubt that Dorig's support is indeed great news. Then, prepare to attack, General Zhongguo. Darren said lightly. 30 seconds ago. Ha 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 ha. Roger. Soon your crew will not be able to hold on. The Golden Lion laughed grimly, with strange red light in his eyes, and the double swords wrapped with black and red lightning slashed down like a long rainbow. Dang! Roger swung his sword fiercely and blocked the Golden Lion's slash. His face was covered with rain, but his eyes were extremely bright. How is it possible? They are all my companions who have accompanied me on such a long journey. He laughed loudly and raised his hand to wipe the rain off his face. The long sword dragging the thunder swept out from bottom to top, as if to chop the sky into pieces. A sword that ghosts and gods retreated from. Gods avoid. Facing the knife, the pupils of the Golden Lion shrank. In the reflection of his pupils, the light of Roger's knife almost completely occupied all the vision in front of him, and an unprecedented sense of crisis came over him. Can't be stopped. Even after so many years, he still clearly remembered that ambitious Guy Rox was too conceited about his powerful strength, and was directly hit hard by Roger's knife, and was finally defeated by Garp. The pores all over his body stood up at this moment, and a strange red light surged in the deepest part of his eyes. The figure of the Golden Lion was like a flexible falcon, tilting sideways in the sky. The blood-colored knife light brushed past his side and cut off a bunch of golden long hair. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the figure of the Golden Lion quickly floated back, looking down at Roger who was starting to fall, with a cruel and hideous smile on his face. Since you are unwilling to surrender, then I can only sink all your crew members into the sea. As soon as the words fell, Sakura 10, and Dead Tree, swung out at the same time. The slash did not appear. The sea suddenly stirred up huge waves. The surging waves rose up on the turbulent sea surface like endless shadows. Boom boom. The sea made a deafening roar, and a huge amount of sea water rose up layer by layer, and in an instant it gathered into a huge sea lion that covered the sky, and the sun opened its mouth and howled as it swallowed the Oro Jackson. Lion's might, earth roll. On the Oro Jackson, the faces of the people in the Roger pirates changed drastically, and their hearts were shaken. This scale of attack, especially in this vast ocean, they simply could not avoid it. A touch of unprecedented despair lingered in their eyes. This desperate situation, even Garp had never brought them. The most important thing is that facing a tsunami of this scale, the high-speed burst device installed in their Oro Jackson has completely become a decoration and meaningless. This madman. Roger's eyes were suddenly filled with bloodshot, staring at the tsunami that covered the sky and the sun, and holding the long sword in his hand tightly. This scale of large-scale attack, not only the Oro Jackson where they were, but even at least 20 warships of the flying pirates on the surrounding sea, have been covered. The bastard Golden Lion completely ignored the lives of his subordinates. Ha 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 ha. Roger, did you see that? Golden Lion grinned even crazier, as if he had seen the scene of Roger's pirate group being sunk into the sea. Although he had fought Roger many times in the past, this was the first time he had forced the latter into a desperate situation like this. As for the 20,000 or 30,000 unlucky guys on the dozen or 20 ships, Golden Lion chose to ignore them directly. Subordinates are meaningless at all. As long as he has strong power and threat, he can have as many subordinates as he wants. Although he failed to get the clue of the ancient weapon from Roger this time, he can definitely find that kind of thing as long as he is willing to spend time. If he can eliminate Roger directly, he can dominate this sea. Thinking of this, the ambition is strong as flames burned in his eyes. This is my true power. Ha 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 ha. In a sea battle, I am invincible. What is that? The Golden Lion's grim smile suddenly stopped. He seemed to have sensed something, his pupils shrank into pins, and he stared at the scene in the distance. The Roger pirates, who were originally in despair, were all stunned, and then turned into unbelievable horror. What is that? Rayleigh murmured with a solemn expression. Heaven, natural disaster. Baki screamed with a pale face, trembling all over, and his eyes seemed to pop out. Not only them. Countless pirates on the sea and on dozens of pirate ships floating in the sky all took a breath of cold air, staring at the sudden change in front of them with their hearts and gallbladders broken, and indescribable panic in their hearts. They saw a scene that they would never forget and was extremely terrifying. Storm. An unprecedented storm, carrying unimaginable natural power, instantly destroyed the huge tsunami that Golden Lion had condensed using the power of the devil fruit. Then the huge amount of seawater rolled back. The roaring tornado hurricane destroyed everything along the way with a devastating attitude. This is a real natural disaster. Chapter 102. This is your grand funeral. What is this? Impossible. A sea storm of this scale. Never seen it before. The people of Roger's pirates looked at the terrifying scene in front of them with shock and horror, and they couldn't believe their eyes. They are different from other pirate groups on this sea. For example, legendary pirates such as Whitebeard and Big Katakana Mom, who are as famous as Roger, either have their own territory or control a sea area, and they will not wander around the sea. But Roger's pirates are different. Thanks to the dream of their idiot captain, they will try to travel to every sea area, every country, every town in this sea. Even those terrifying and dangerous places that others dare not set foot on, they will break in without hesitation, just to enjoy the local scenery and beauty. But even so, even the Roger pirates who have personally experienced countless dangerous places have never seen such an exaggerated scene as this one. Wind, strong wind. The world's rare storm, carrying a huge amount of sea water and heavy rain, rushes, stirs, spirals, and dances wantonly. The sea is mysterious and dangerous. For pirates, sea storms are truly the most desperate natural disasters. The heavy rain, the exploding wind, the rushing water column. One waterspout after another continues to appear, connecting the sky and the earth. The most terrifying disaster in nature, at this moment, is wildly intertwined, condensed, and derived, turning into a devastating disaster. At a glance, the sea storm that covered the sky and the sun, swept by dozens of hurricane tornadoes, seemed to be sweeping in like the collapse of heaven and earth. In the horrified eyes of everyone, several warships of the flying pirates group at the edge of the sea battlefield were swallowed up by the sea storm in the blink of an eye. The moment they touched the sea tornado, they were torn to pieces by its terrifying strangulation and power. The wreckage and fragments of the ship, the broken masts and hulls, and the bodies of the pirates torn apart alive. All rose into the sky under the storm. Thousands of pirates did not even make any resistance. Without even a miserable wail, it turned into a large amount of blood foam, dyeing the sea tornadoes that connected the sky and the ground dark red. Damn it! What happened? The Oro Jackson under his feet was shaking under the impact of the mighty storm, as if it would fall apart at any time. All power systems failed at this moment, the sails were blown to pieces, and the hurricane tore back and forth, trapped the pirate ships on the sea and in the sky in the strong wind, as if they were trapped in an endless quagmire and could not move. How is this possible? The Golden Lion floated in the sky, feeling the oppression of this sudden storm, and a bad premonition rose in his heart, and his eyelids twitched wildly. He could clearly feel that he was gradually getting out of the floating control of the flying pirate fleet. The power of this sea storm was too huge. Even as strong as he was, he could not resist this great power of nature. Why did this happen? My navigator. That bastard. Didn't they say that although the climate in the Etwall Sea is complicated, it is still within the controllable range? Looking at the dozens of sea tornadoes rushing over like a collapsed wall, and their advancing speed is still increasing, quickly engulfing and destroying his fleet, the red eyes of the Golden Lion are almost about to crack. Rip. A series of earth-shattering loud noises came from the sky. In this stormy climate, pale thunders continued to develop under the influence of the sea storm, and the thunder flashed in the sky. Ah! Lord Golden Lion, help! Boss Shiki! A short and terrified scream came, and the two pirate ships floating in the sky had been strangled by the storm. The fragments and wreckage of the hull were scattered all over the sky, mixed with fragments of corpses. The complex climate of Etwall, the stormy weather, contributed to the power of the storm at sea, becoming more and more violent and uncontrollable. We must retreat. Golden Lion looked at this scene with a sullen face, and this thought subconsciously emerged in his mind. Under the influence of this storm, he could no longer control the floating of the fleet. The storm formed by dozens of hurricanes was already close at hand. If he continued to stay, not only would the fleet be wiped out here, but he himself would probably fall into this storm. The ability of the floating fruit is most afraid of storms. Golden Lion even began to feel that it was becoming difficult for his body to float in the air. Damn it! He cursed fiercely and was about to retreat. Unexpectedly. Ha 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 ha. Shiki. Here I come again. A bloody figure, like a madman, broke through the rain curtain, dragging a long sword wrapped in black and red lightning. And attacked again. You idiot. Golden Lion's pupils shook violently, and he roared. I don't want to play with you, Roger. Dang. The two swords held Roger's long sword, and a majestic air wave burst out and continued to spread. A large number of sparks flew up, illuminating Roger's heartless face and Golden Lion's gloomy expression. I don't want to be buried with you here. Golden Lion roared furiously, feeling the approach of the storm. His heart became more and more anxious, and a layer of cold sweat oozed out of his entire back. Roger was full of fighting spirit and laughed heroically. Anyway, we can't escape, so why not fight here happily until the last moment of our lives? You can't escape, but I can. Golden Lion was almost furious. He burst out with all his strength without reservation, and slashed down fiercely with the two swords wrapped in thunder. Ghost Lion slashing wave. Dang. A deafening explosion sounded, and Roger's figure had nowhere to hold his ground in the sky, and the whole person flew back. Golden Lion didn't have time to look at it for a second, because a huge shadow had risen behind him. The storm is within reach. Must retreat immediately. Golden Lion roared madly in his heart, and used his devil fruit ability with all his strength to make his body float up and away from this vast storm. The power of the storm bound his actions, making it extremely difficult for him to take off, like a huge whirlpool that was about to suck him in. Get out of here. Golden Lion roared with all his strength, gnashing his teeth, and 2 lines of blood began to ooze out of his nostrils. Under the power of the floating fruit with all his strength, his body began to struggle out of the shackles of the storm. Start to take off. It works. I can definitely escape. The Golden Lion's eyes suddenly lit up brightly, and he couldn't help laughing. Ha 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 ha. Roger, I'm leaving first. It's a pity that I couldn't sink you into the sea with my own hands. But the result won't change. Your voyage ends here. Bury him here. Isn't this unprecedented storm your grandest funeral? Ha ha ha. The golden lion's arrogant laughter spread across the sky. However, at this moment, shoot him, Yan Mo. A voice as cold as a ghost came from a distance several miles away. I'm grateful for everything. Chapter 103, All-Out Attack. This voice seemed to have some special penetrating power, and it was clearly transmitted to everyone's ears in this earth-shattering environment. The moment the voice sounded, the golden lion's mind was shocked, and his pupils shrank to the extreme. This familiar, damn voice. Could it be? An extremely bad premonition suddenly rose in the deepest part of his mind. Suddenly. Swish. A sharp black light, like a sharp arrow breaking through the air, tore through the wind and rain in the sky at an unimaginable speed, and pierced through the thick storm wall. Whistling. It was that knife. The golden lion instantly recognized this shimmering and strange black light. The demon sword Yama roared through the wind and rain and the vast storm, leaving behind a short, vacuum, tunnel. The golden lion also finally discovered something strange on the distant sea from the trajectory of this vacuum. Warships. The shadows of warships loomed in the majestic wind and rain, and on the leading main battleship. The golden lion suddenly saw the tall figure standing on the bow smoking a cigar. He was grinning at himself. Damn it. This is an ambush by the Navy. How could the Navy know that I was in this sea area? How long have they been ambushing here? How many troops are ambushed there? A series of questions suddenly occupied the golden lion's heart, leaving his brain blank for a moment. Buzz buzz buzz. Yanmo tore through the air and arrived in an instant. In the reflection of the shrinking pupils of the golden lion, it rapidly expanded at an astonishing speed. The golden lion's back felt cold, and he gritted his teeth and raised his two swords. With a clang, Yan Mo, who was wrapped in the armament hockey, was hit hard and bounced back. The golden lion himself was also hit by the exaggerated impact force carried by Yan Mo and suddenly stagnated. Then, his pupils suddenly expanded, his eyes were about to burst, and they were scarlet. A trace of incredible fear surged on his face. Because it was Roger's attack and Darren's knife, so delayed. Boundless swallowing and suction surged from behind, and the roaring storm had torn the clothes on his back and scratched his skin. No. The golden lion murmured in an unacceptable way. Boom. The earth-shaking storm completely swallowed him up. Ah. The golden lion, unable to move in the storm, howled miserably, feeling as if his body was torn apart by the storm. At a certain moment, he seemed to see a dark object flying towards him. His eyes went dark, and a deep pain surged in his forehead, and he completely lost consciousness. It actually succeeded. On the sea with huge waves, all the Navy on the warship stared at the terrifying storm in the distance with their eyes wide open, and felt a chill on their backs. Zhongguo swallowed his saliva with a gurgle, and a drop of cold sweat flowed down his forehead. Such a natural disaster-level storm is really terrible. It seems that even the sky and the sea cannot withstand its power, and a deafening roar is heard. Draeger's strength has become so much stronger. Such a thought suddenly flashed through Zhongguo's mind. Draeger has disappeared. Sakazuki said gloomily. Zhongguo was startled, and immediately looked in the direction of the boat. On the vast sea, the huge waves were still roaring, and the boat had capsized and was smashed into pieces by the waves. And the culprit, who created this storm had completely disappeared. Gone just now. So fast. What kind of ability is this? Teleportation. Could it be the guy next to Draeger? It's so scary, it actually created such a devastating natural disaster. Borsellino didn't know when he had walked over from the beach chair, and smiled slowly. He stroked the stubble on his chin with one hand, looking at the unstoppable storm in the distance with a smile, and his words were meaningful. Even if our Navy fleet faces such a storm at sea, it is estimated that the whole army will be annihilated. Hearing this, Sakazuki's face became more gloomy, as if water was about to drip out. Sengoku's pupils shrank slightly, and his mood suddenly became extremely complicated. Although this exaggerated storm was not entirely caused by Dragon himself. The dangerous, chaotic and complex weather in the Etwall Sea itself greatly increased Dragon's devil fruit ability. But even so, it is enough to prove the boy's terrible dominance in naval battles. And such a genius with invincible, large-scale naval combat capabilities left the Navy and became a wanted criminal. When Sengoku thought of this, his thoughts became chaotic. What if there really is such a day? The Navy really wants to go to war with Dragon. Sengoku simply dare not imagine that picture. No, now this is not the time to think about this problem. Zongguo shook his head decisively, dispelling all the messy thoughts in his heart. His expression became solemn again, and his eyes were fixed on Darren. Darren, when will we launch the attack? Wait a little longer. Darren exhaled a dragon-like smoke from his mouth, and a hideous sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. We must wait until the storm is over before we can launch the attack. Otherwise, if we are involved, even our Navy's warships will not be able to withstand this level of disaster. He glanced at the direction where Dragon disappeared, and then retracted his gaze. Big Bear's ability is really convenient. Darren got the help of Big Bear, plus his own amazing dominance of the wind fruit in naval battles. There are not many people on this sea who can force him into a desperate situation. Adding his own funding, in time, the army led by Dragon will inevitably grow into a powerful force that will shock the whole world. This thought flashed through Darren's mind. At this time, a black light in the void flew back and hovered beside Darren, reflecting the cold light of choosing people to devour in the flashing lightning. It was Yama. Boom. The storm in the distance gradually eased and rolled towards the sea farther away. According to Darren's estimation, this level of sea storm will spread for at least hundreds of miles before it completely dissipates, and it may destroy one or two islands on the way. But that is not a problem he should care about. Darren raised his head and looked around. The sea surface after the storm was still surging. The whole sea seemed to be crushed by the gods from the sky, leaving only countless dilapidated pirate ship wreckages, and the broken corpses withered on the sea like buoys. It's time to clear the field. Darren sneered, and his cold eyes quickly locked on a figure who stood up staggeringly on the wreckage of the pirate ship. Raised his right hand. 5 fingers spread out forcefully. Seeing this action, more than 10,000 naval elites on the 10 warships were shocked, straightened their chests, and drew their swords. The vice admiral clenched his fists hard. This is a military gesture for attack. All troops, attack. As soon as the words fell, the drums shook the sky. The cover of the warships was completely removed, and the huge and magnificent white sails were raised together. The black, Jung X, characters with flying dragons and phoenixes bloomed simultaneously on the 10 warships lined up in a row, with a murderous aura. Attack. Zongguo, who had been impatient for a long time, suddenly drew the saber at his waist, stepped onto the bow with red eyes, and roared. For justice. The murderous aura soared into the sky. Chapter 104a. Rudder. Damn it. Golden Lion staggered to his feet from the wreckage of a pirate ship. The scene that came into his eyes almost made him black out and faint again. The sea was turbulent, filled with the wreckage and debris of pirate ships, and the bodies of pirates were everywhere, densely packed and countless, like hell on earth. The flying pirate fleet that he had reorganized was annihilated again. He subconsciously turned his head to look in a certain direction. In the middle of a large area of drifting pirate ship wreckage, the Oro Jackson of the Roger pirates was floating there. The mast of the pirate ship had been broken in the storm, and the sails were hanging in the air like rags. The surface of the hull was covered with pits and scars, and the entire bow was severely damaged, sunken into a big hole, and it was almost impossible to distinguish its original appearance. Even so, the main structure of this legendary pirate ship, built by shipbuilding master Tom using the precious tree atom, actually withstood the impact of the storm just now and remained intact. Members of Roger's pirate group supported the hull, looking like they had survived a disaster. Almost died. Baki was soaked by the sea water, lying there limply, his face as pale as paper. Rayleigh held his belt with one hand, his face was also extremely ugly. Everyone looked like a drowned chicken, gasping for breath. Ha 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 ha. At the bow, Roger sat on the broken deck with his buttocks, and laughed happily with his head tilted back. Survived. I actually survived like this. His laughter was full of hearty joy, and the expression on his face was full of the heroic spirit of seeing through life and death. Seeing their captain like this, the others looked at each other and couldn't help laughing. Yes, they survived. Although the Oro Jackson was seriously damaged, at least they survived. This is a blessing in disguise. On the other hand, the fleet of the flying pirates led by Golden Lion had all been destroyed in the storm just now. This storm completely rewrote the history of this battle. However, they couldn't laugh for long, and a shout of moving mountains and filling the sea came from the distant sea. Kill. Attack the Roger pirates. Kill Golden Lion. For justice. Boom boom. The fierce roar of cannons sounded, and countless shells cut through the sky like a rain curtain, and then fell. The flames shot up into the sky. Is this the Navy? Rayleigh's pupils shrank. The faces of others also changed drastically. While launching attacks to block the shells, they all looked in that direction. 1, 2, 3. 10 heavy warships armed to the teeth, like a mighty steel torrent, broke through the wind and rain in the sky, and rushed towards them at the highest speed. The murderous aura was deafening, and the momentum was unstoppable. The cannons on the warships spit out flames crazily, illuminating the powerful figures. It's the Navy. It's over. This time it's really over. That's the Navy's fleet. They are coming for us. Bucky was so scared that he almost broke his voice, his eyeballs shot out of his eye sockets, and he trembled. How did they know we were here? Looking at the imposing Navy fleet, everyone's face was extremely ugly. The seagull flags fluttering in the wind, dancing in the wind and rain, brewing a deep iron-blooded atmosphere. Warring states. Roger's eyes condensed, and instantly locked onto a familiar figure on the main battleship. And those Navy kids. Rayleigh's expression was extremely solemn. The ship, the captain. And the guy who took off your pants. Bucky trembled with his hands, pointed at the tall figure standing in the front of the main battleship, and trembled in fear. Roger. Can you please stop mentioning this matter? It was just an accident. Roger turned back and yelled with gnashing teeth. Shanks held the broken mast, gasping for breath, and looked at the Navy with an indelible fear in his eyes. He didn't forget that it was this guy who almost killed him in the first half of the Grand Line. That was the moment when Shanks was closest to death in his life. This is troublesome. Even Sengoku is here. Rayleigh frowned, but his hands did not slow down at all, constantly swinging and slashing, breaking the falling shells. As the Navy fleet approached, the frequency of the bombardment became more and more intensive, almost sweeping over. A strong flame suddenly exploded on the sea. It's okay, if it's only Sengoku, he can't stop us. Roger laughed heartlessly. As long as that bastard Garp doesn't come, we still have a chance to escape. As soon as these words came out, the people in Roger's pirate group had a bad premonition. The next second. Ha 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 ha. Roger, you really chose the third route. A dull thunderous laugh suddenly came from another direction. Hearing this voice, the people in Roger's pirate group shuddered and glared at Roger fiercely. Roger. The corner of his mouth twitched and he turned his head to look. I saw a unique dog-head warship that broke out of the sea in that direction at some point and headed straight for them. On the bow of the warship, a burly Navy man wearing a dog-head hat crossed his arms, stared at Roger with burning eyes, and laughed. Vice Admiral of the Navy. Hero, Garp. Bucky held his head and screamed madly. Even Garp is here, we can't escape at all. Rayleigh and the others also felt that the situation was extremely difficult and their scalps were numb. They were surrounded again. At this time, the Golden Lion suddenly let out a resentful roar. Damn it! Damn the Navy! He stood up shakily, staring fiercely at the direction of the Navy fleet. Just as he was about to take a step forward, he felt dizzy. A sharp, unbearable stinging pain came from the top of his head, almost penetrating into his bones. The golden lion was stunned, and subconsciously raised his hand to touch it, and then the whole person froze in place. A cold and hard metal touch was transmitted to his fingers. His pupils suddenly contracted, as if struck by lightning. Tick. A line of warm blood slid down his forehead, flowing along his eye sockets, nose and cheeks, dripping on the ground. It dyed his vision red. The golden lion took a trembling step back, and a flash of fear flashed across his expression. A tearing pain came from the skull. My head was almost pierced through. He stared blankly at the famous sword in his hand. The cold blade covered with rain reflected his appearance. Something was deeply inserted into his head. It was perfectly embedded there. It did not cause extensive bleeding. It was a dark rudder. Chapter 105. You're the only one who can shake people. Golden Lion was struck by lightning, and stood there in a daze with a pale face. He staggered back, and a fear he had never felt before rushed into his mind, making his scalp numb. He had fought countless battles in his life, and had no idea how many powerful opponents he had fought with. He had been injured countless times. Burning in flames, broken bones, poisoned, and severely injured internal organs, but Golden Lion had never suffered such a strange and terrifying injury. The human head is the most important part of the body, involving nerves throughout the body, and even affecting personality, will and emotions. It is the most vulnerable part of the human body. Damn. But now, a broken rudder is deeply inserted into his head. Faced with this situation, Golden Lion didn't know what to do for a moment. What's even more bizarre is that, although his head was almost penetrated by the rudder, the amount of bleeding was extremely limited. Except for the waves of tingling and dizziness, he didn't even feel much discomfort. Thinking of this, Golden Lion couldn't help but reach out to touch the rudder, but as soon as he touched it, he withdrew his hand as if he was electrocuted. No, it must not be pulled out. The rudder is now strangely, perfectly, embedded in the head, in a weird state of balance. It is for this reason that he can survive. But once it is pulled out, Golden Lion can't imagine the consequences. Boom. The fierce artillery fire of the Navy directly interrupted his thoughts, and several shells exploded around the wreckage of the pirate ship, blowing away several water columns. The cold water rushed down, making Golden Lion suddenly sober up. He was shocked, and looked at the Roger pirates in the distance unwillingly. He gritted his teeth so hard that he almost broke them. We must retreat. Without any hesitation, Golden Lion decisively chose to evacuate. With a rudder stuck in his head, his condition was obviously very wrong. If he continued to linger here, he would only be killed by the Navy. The strong men of the same era as him, Garp and Sengoku, and the 3 difficult monsters, 10 heavy warships with more than 10,000 elites. The luxurious lineup of the Navy was definitely coming for him and Roger. But at the moment when Golden Lion was about to fly up, swish! 2 sharp phantom lights, one black and one white, had suddenly cut through the air, approaching rapidly with an unpredictable terrifying propulsion force. Under the violent magnetic field, the armed color domineering entangled with the 2 swords intertwined into a spiral wave of air, exploding circles of ripples in the air. The exaggerated cyclone even tore 2 long grooves on the sea surface. Damn Navy kid, it's you again. Golden Lion's pupils shrank and he roared furiously. Holding the sword with both hands, the dark armed color domineering covered at the same time, and slashed heavily. Clang! A crisp sound exploded, and the bursting wind burst out, blowing Golden Lion's golden hair flying backwards. Yanmo made a violent buzzing sound and rolled back. I will never let you go. Golden Lion roared, slashed Yanmo away, and took a step forward. The 2 swords made a strange posture, the body sank, the golden hair danced, and from a distance it looked like a crazy lion hunting. Ghost Lion 2 swords chopping wave. Swish! He suddenly jumped out, and a golden flash seemed to pass through the void. The 2 famous swords, Yakura-ten, and Deadwood, overlapped, and with an extremely precise and daring posture, the blades converged and hit the tip of the sword of Shohei who came from behind. Boom! A deafening explosion, a roaring air wave rushed into the sky, rolling up waves as high as tens of meters. Crack, crack. A long and thin crack gradually appeared at the tip of Shohai's sword, and then continued to spread, and finally the cracks covered the entire blade. With your half-baked swordsmanship, you want to kill me. The golden lion's eyes were red, and he burst into a roar full of anger, staring at the tall navy figure on the leading warship. The overlapping double swords suddenly pressed down. With a clang. The good and fast sword was 50 times, and Shohai was instantly shattered into countless pieces. Sparks flew everywhere, illuminating the brutal and gloomy face of the golden lion. However, this knife was not over yet. After the two peerless swords of the golden lion shattered the hunting sea, a terrifying wave of slashing air burst out. Two huge golden sword beams suddenly cut through the sea of thousands of meters and roared towards Darren on the main battleship. It can be imagined that with the golden lion's two-sword swordsmanship that is the best in the sea, if this knife hits, the entire warship will be cut into several pieces in an instant. The overwhelming breath rushed to his face, wrapping up the wide cloak. Darren narrowed his eyes, as if he didn't see the two-sword energies that were devastating and cutting off everything, and exhaled a puff of smoke with his hands on his chest. Because two figures had taken a step forward and appeared in front of him at the same time. The warring state's braid beard flew, and the body continued to rise, emitting dazzling golden light. Sakaski's entire right arm swelled into hot magma, and black smoke rose. The two men acted in unison, punching out with gloomy expressions. Big Buddha impact. Big fire spout. The magnificent golden Buddha light and the scorching red magma interweave magnificent and boundless colors. Boom. Boom. The violent explosion surged into the sky, and the sword light was defeated. Black smoke billowed into the sky, completely obscuring the view of the warship. Seeing this scene, the corner of the golden lion's mouth curled up with a mocking grin. Ha 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 ha, I'll play with you guys here today. He burst into a wild laugh and jumped up. But at this moment, the dark sky above his head suddenly lit up with a dazzling light, the light of the eyes. I can't let you run away like this, golden lion. A slow and annoying voice came out. Countless golden photons gathered into a tall figure in the sky. Borsellino opened his arms with a smile, pinched his orchid fingers, and his body was bathed in the light. Yashikani no Magatama. The golden light bullets in the sky were like a storm, pouring madly towards the golden lion. This troublesome yellow monkey. Golden lion gritted his teeth and cursed secretly, and his figure quickly moved left and right in the air to avoid Borsellino's sweeping attack. Boom. The light bullets fell on the sea and the floating pirate ship wreckage like a rain curtain, exploding into balls of intense flames. But just because Borsellino delayed like this, the Navy's fleet had already broken through the thick smoke and directly entered the battlefield. Don't think about escaping, Golden Lion. This is a storm I prepared for you. Darren sneered. A storm worth 3 billion Baileys. What? Amid the billowing smoke and flames, Golden Lion was shocked. His eyes were instantly filled with bloodshot. He turned his head in disbelief and stared at the arrogant vice-admiral. This is impossible. No one on this sea can control the weather. Even if there is, it is impossible to achieve the terrifying level of the storm at sea just now. Darren exhaled a puff of smoke and smiled sarcastically. Do you think you are the only one who can call people? Chapter 106 Leave Golden Lion to me. Do you think you are the only one who can call people? A sneer appeared on the corner of Darren's mouth. In order to avenge the Coin Island, Golden Lion called Big Katakana Middle. Mom and Kaido to form a short-term alliance and madly attacked Marineford. Call people. Golden Lion was stunned, and then suddenly reacted. Although he didn't understand the jargon of calling people, he could roughly guess from the sarcastic tone in Darren's voice that this was what seeking external help meant. Bearing the pain and dizziness of the rudder piercing his head, Golden Lion forced his thoughts to work. That sudden and vast storm that changed the fate of this war. The ability to control the weather. No, this is definitely not the ability to control the weather. With Golden Lion's vision and experience, he knew very well that there has never been such an exaggerated devil fruit ability on this sea. Storm. It's the wind. A hint of bitter coldness flashed across Golden Lion's eyes. It's the kid who defected from the Navy not long ago. Garp's biological son, Monkey D. Dragon. If that's the case. He understood it instantly. That storm was planned by Darren, the damn kid. Before the Golden Lion could fully react, Darren on the warship had already moved. Leave the Golden Lion to me, you go deal with the Roger pirates. Darren said this in a cold tone, bent his knees, and sank down. Squeak. The terrifying force made the entire warship whine under the heavy load. Under the wide eyes of Zongguo and others, the bow of the entire heavy warship was directly pressed down by Darren, and the draft depth increased by several meters. The hull tilted forward violently, and the stern was raised high. The Navy soldiers on the deck staggered and looked at the tall back in front with shocked expressions, and a turbulent wave was set off in their hearts. Just relying on the strength of the body, the warship was almost overturned directly. Can you do it alone, Darren boy? Zongguo stood swaying, staring at Darren, and asked anxiously. Who knows about this kind of thing? A crazy arc appeared at the corner of Darren's mouth, and his eyes were filled with blazing ambition. Looking at the battlefield that was like hell on earth ahead, he felt as if the blood in his body was burning at this moment. The roaring sea. The hot wind. The cold rainstorm. The smell of gunpowder in the air. And the legendary pirate who was so arrogant. Shiki the Golden Lion. All kinds of information, smells and sounds filled his brain, cells and soul, making him tremble all over. That was not fear, but excitement. This was the magnificent Battle of Etwall in the history of pirates. A huge war recorded in world history. The only difference from the original plot was, this war was planned by himself. The Storm of Fate, the defeated flying pirate group, the fateful rudder. Darren never believed in fate. Even if there is such a fate, he must create it himself. And now, it is time for him to really fight with a strong man of the level of Golden Lion Shiki. Darren's eyes burst out with amazing fighting spirit, and he smoked the cigar in his mouth, compressed his knees to the extreme. And kicked hard. Boom. The heavy warship moving at full speed was directly knocked back 10 meters by his kick. With the help of this powerful recoil force, the figure of the Navy Vice Admiral was like a cannonball that was ejected from the barrel, and it shot out with a bang. Hundreds of meters away, in a flash. Navy brat, you're looking for death. Golden Lion roared with red eyes. This ignorant fellow dared to launch a rush attack in front of him. Double swords suddenly slashed out. Dozens of golden sword beams shot out in succession, overlapping and overlapping, cutting the vast sea surface into a crisscrossing network structure. Lion Chikiri Valley. The strange red light in the depths of Darren's pupils suddenly surged, and the perception of the observation hockey opened, accurately predicting the trajectory of the slash. Darren's figure flexibly moved in the trajectory of flight, dodging the slash of Golden Lion dangerously. It's not that easy. Golden Lion's eyes flashed with a killing chill, and he swung a sword in the air. The invisible power spread out, and the originally calm sea surface was turbulent again. A huge amount of seawater was engulfed by the floating force and poured back, condensing into a seawater lion that covered the sky and sun, pressing down on Darren like a landslide. The bloody mouth opened, as if it wanted to swallow the tiny Navy Vice Admiral in one gulp. Lion's might earth roll. A huge shadow rose up in front of his eyes, as if the sky was collapsing. The salty smell of seawater made Darren's pores stand up. This is seawater. It is the biggest weakness of the devil fruit ability user. Once hit by this move, even if you don't die, you will lose your combat ability on the spot. Yan Mo. Darren's eyes condensed and shouted. A black light suddenly penetrated from the void, and the moment it shot out, it suddenly expanded and became larger. Momo 20 times Demon Slash. Swish. The lion was pierced by the multiplied Yanmo, and it stagnated for a moment, and a huge hollow hole appeared. Seawater fell all over the sky. The next moment, while the sea lion had not yet completely closed, Darren's figure suddenly accelerated and passed through it. He was approaching the golden lion. Ha 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 ha. Darren boy, I'm here to take revenge. A loud laugh quickly approached from the side. Roger's figure jumped up, and the long sword wrapped with black and red lightning in his hand slashed at Darren fiercely. Deadly sense of crisis approached, but Darren didn't even blink. Because a burly figure wearing a dog-head military cap had flashed behind him. A punch also wrapped with black lightning. Blasted out heavily. Boom. The iron fist like a meteor and the sharp blade that cuts off everything collided fiercely. The purgatory-like strong wind suddenly spread, and countless lightnings in the void were born and died, filling the entire space and depriving all colors. The dark clouds collapsed in waves, tearing a huge crack with the two as the boundary. Garp! Roger exclaimed. In the reflection of his pupils, a swaying white cape flew up, and the two black words, Jung X, on it danced like a dragon. Ha 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 ha. Roger, your opponent is me. Kapu laughed loudly, and before Roger could react, he punched him in the face. Boom. Roger crashed into the Oro Jackson like a cannonball, blasting off a large piece of the deck. A broken tooth mixed with blood fell with a clang. Damn it, Kapu, you bastard. Roger wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and yelled with his front teeth leaking. At the same time, Darren had already pounced in front of the golden lion like a hungry wolf, and his 5 fingers were combined into a dragon claw, piercing through the golden lion's face. Golden lion, speaking of which, this rudder is really suitable for you. He smiled mockingly. This is the crown I carefully prepared for you. Chapter 107. Can you run away? Hearing this, the eyes of the golden lion were suddenly filled with countless ferocious bloodshot, and the veins on his forehead bulged. An indescribable rage swarmed out of his chest, like a surging wave, which could not be contained at all. You are looking for death. Navy Kid. The famous sword, Sakura 10, in his left hand burst out with a sharp hissing sound, and chopped down fiercely. Clang. The sharp famous sword and the black dragon claw collided violently. Bang! At the moment of the explosion, the 3-finger dragon claw grabbed a large piece of sparks on the blade of the famous sword, illuminating the arrogant and grinning face of the Navy Vice Admiral. However, at the moment of the fight, the face of the golden lion changed slightly. This power is wrong. It's not that Golden Lion had never fought with Darren. In the battles of Coin Island and Marineford, he had easily injured the latter with his terrifying and domineering dominance. But the scene at the moment was somewhat beyond his expectations. This kid's strength has become much stronger than when he invaded Marineford. When they were fighting each other, Golden Lion even felt like he was competing with an elite warrior of the giant race. What on earth did this Navy kid go through? His strength has improved too fast. How long has it been since they fought several times? Half a year. Has he grown to this point? Based on this tentative confrontation and his own vision of roaming the sea for so many years, Golden Lion judged at a glance that Darren had entered the ranks of Admiral-level combat power, and officially entered the ranks of the gold medal players on this sea. Something is wrong. Darren, without giving the Golden Lion any time to react, his left hand also formed a dragon claw and grabbed the Golden Lion's crotch fiercely. The black dragon claw cut through the air, bursting out a shrill sound, and its power seemed to be enough to destroy everything. The Golden Lion gritted his teeth and felt an inexplicable chill in his lower body. This insidious kid. Dang. The deadwood blocked down with a reverse grip, and resisted Darren's attack. Looking at the Golden Lion's obviously slow reaction, Darren's mouth curled up with a meaningful sneer. A faint electric light flashed between his fingers. The Golden Lion's pupils suddenly contracted. This is. His target is. The rudder inserted in his head. The invisible power spread out, the magnetic field suddenly increased, and even the surrounding void derived jumping arcs. A smile appeared at the corner of Darren's mouth. Win. As long as he uses the power of the magnet fruit to pull out the rudder on the Golden Lion's head, with such an exaggerated wound. Even if he doesn't die, he won't live long. Judging from the texture and luster of the surface of the rudder. It is definitely metal. Arcs flashed in the void. However, when Darren looked at the rudder on the Golden Lion's head with a sure win, the scene that came into his eyes made him stunned for a moment. The dense and solemn black, like surging water, tightly covered the golden lion's head, and even completely wrapped the rudder. This is extremely strong armament hockey. Ha 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 ha. I'm not a fool like Roger. The golden lion laughed wildly. Navy kid, your devil fruit ability is indeed very strange, but don't forget. As long as you have enough hockey, you can counter the influence of all devil fruit abilities. Taking advantage of Darren's stunned moment, he kicked out brazenly. With a domineering kick, he kicked out a force similar to that of a great swordsman. In addition to his unparalleled two-sword swordsmanship, Golden Lion himself is also a strong man who has developed kicking skills to an extremely profound level. A kick like a sharp blade breaking through the air directly cut open Darren's chest. Swish! A blood groove exploded in Darren's chest, and he stood there in astonishment, as if he couldn't believe this scene. The hot blood spurted out of the blood groove like a fountain. Splashing on the cruel and hideous face of Golden Lion, it looked even more terrifying and crazy. Although your strength has indeed improved rapidly, but Navy brat, the real combat power is not simply piling up hard power. It is to melt all abilities and tricks into your heart and burst out with 120% power. You want to kill me, you are decades too early. The Golden Lion laughed grimly and slashed down with a knife. The golden blade light dragged the bloodline and turned into a vast slash, directly slashing the entire Navy admiral into the wreckage of the pirate ship below. Swish! The sword light spread out, and a crack hundreds of meters deep suddenly bloomed on the sea surface, spreading to more than 1,000 meters, looking shocking. Darren's body fell to the ground like a cannonball, and another tragic sword mark appeared on his chest, and blood spit out of his mouth. Darren Warring States, who was leading the fleet to encircle Roger's pirate group in the distance, noticed this scene, his face changed drastically, and he roared with red eyes. Just as he was about to make a move, a figure with black and red lightning wrapped around his body suddenly rushed up. Looking around during a battle is not a good habit, Zhang. The momentum released by the newcomer was so powerful that Zhang heart sank suddenly. A magnificent golden light bloomed, and his body suddenly expanded several times, turning into a golden war Buddha more than 10 meters high. He slapped out a palm without even looking. Bang! A knife wrapped in the domineering aura fell, and collided with the golden Buddha to produce a violent air wave. They separated at the touch. The two retreated more than 10 meters on the deck of the warship at the same time. Pluto. Rayleigh. Seeing the newcomer, Zhang face became extremely solemn. But he could no longer care too much, and his eyes were still fixed on Darren's direction. Ha 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 ha. That's it, Navy kid. After a successful strike, the Golden Lion in the sky did not give Darren a chance to breathe. He has been roaming the sea for so many years, and he is ruthless and merciless. As long as he seizes the opportunity, he will never give the enemy any chance to counterattack. He held the two famous swords, Yingshi and Kumu, in his backhand. First, he leapt back briefly. Then, like a crazy lion flying in the sky, he was full of murderous intent. He began to dive. Like a meteorite falling. Accelerate. Accelerate. Accelerate again. From a distance, the whole person of Jinshizi seemed to be wrapped in a layer of flaming cyclone, and his two swords fell down at an unimaginable speed. This is a fatal blow. Die. The bloody appearance of the Vice Admiral of the Navy was reflected in the violent pupils of Jinshizi, and he grinned murderously. Lion Ghost Meteorite. The two swords went down. Falling. At this moment, a flash of black light suddenly shot back and swept towards the Golden Lion. Will it work? The Golden Lion fell with his sword, and swung his sword without even looking, directly slashing Yanmo away. Taking advantage of this brief moment, Darren gritted his teeth, and an arc flashed between his fingers, and his body suddenly moved sideways for several meters. Avoided the attack of the Golden Lion. Boom! The wreckage of the pirate ship floating on the sea was instantly dismembered, and countless fragments soared into the sky, covering all vision. The next second, the Golden Lion leapt out of it like a devil, and his violent eyes stared at the back of the Navy Vice Admiral who was already fleeing at high speed in the distance, with a sneer on the corner of his mouth. "Want to run now? Can you run?" His figure suddenly soared up and chased after the seriously injured Darren at a very fast speed. "Borsellino!" Warring States shouted anxiously. "I know." A golden light suddenly rose to the sky, and in the blink of an eye it gathered into a human shape. Borsellino opened his arms, and countless light bullets attacked the golden lion again. "Yashikani no Magatama. Ha 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 ha. Yellow-skinned kid, it seems you haven't learned your lesson yet." The golden lion laughed loudly and swung his sword in the air. The sea surface suddenly rioted, and the surging sea water poured back, turning into a huge sea lion, and collided head-on with the golden light bullets in the sky. Boom! Violent explosions bloomed one after another, and large groups of fire burst out in the cold sea water. The extreme high temperature evaporated a large amount of sea water, and a thick mist emerged. A few seconds later, countless photons gathered into a human figure on the warship. Borsellino looked at the disappeared golden lion and smiled helplessly. "The attack was blocked, and I can't catch up." Zhongguo was stunned, and then gritted his teeth. Damn it. But he couldn't care too much at this time, just hoped that Darren would be sure enough as he said. "Start the siege. Destroy the Roger pirates." He shook his head, suppressed his inner uneasiness, and raised his arms with a murderous face. But at the same time, a faint doubt rose in Zhongguo's heart. Didn't Darren cultivate into an indestructible body? How come he was so easily injured by the golden lion just now? And the amount of bleeding. I always feel something is wrong. Chapter 108 Roger belongs to me. Surround them. For justice. Kill. Destroy Roger's pirate group. The shouts of the Navy shook the sky. On the warship. Are you so relieved, Sengoku? Pluto Rayleigh held a long sword in his hand, squinted his eyes and glanced at the direction where Darren and the golden lion were going away, frowned secretly, and his eyes fell on Sengoku again, saying lightly. Although that kid is quite powerful, he will die if he fights the golden lion one-on-one. If I remember correctly, he should be the most important and precious strategic deterrent weapon of your navy now, right? Sengoku narrowed his eyes and said coldly. Pluto Rayleigh, this is not something you should care about. He glanced at the Oro Jackson, which was completely surrounded by warships not far away. I finally waited for such an opportunity to catch all of you Roger pirates in one fell swoop. I won't be distracted by such a thing. With Sengoku's sharp eyes, he could see the real intention of Pluto Rayleigh's words at a glance. Rayleigh deliberately brought it up to distract Sengoku. It would be better if he could allocate some high-end combat power to support Darren. The pressure on their Roger pirates would naturally be reduced, so there would be more opportunities to escape from the encirclement of the Navy. Don't waste your thoughts. There's really no way. Rayleigh sighed, his eyes filled with an indissoluble solemnity. He quickly glanced in the direction of the Oro Jackson. The pirate ship had been completely surrounded by the Navy, and the two sides launched a boarding battle, killing each other on the pirate ship and the Navy's warships. Facing the aggressive Navy, their own crew members were in danger. After all, they had just experienced a rare storm at sea, which consumed a lot of physical strength. Most importantly, the Oro Jackson was seriously damaged. Although the shipwright was already doing his best to repair it, it could not set sail in a short time. They could only fight for their lives. Thinking of this, the aura released from Rayleigh's body suddenly rose. Zzz. Dense red arcs surrounded his body, and his aura was so violent that the surrounding air vibrated violently and became blurred. What a strong domineering aura. Zhongguo's eyes condensed, and a trace of fear emerged in his heart. It is rumored that Pluto Rayleigh, as Roger's right arm, has strength that is not inferior to the latter. Now it seems that this may not be just a rumor. So Zhongguo, did your navy spread that news? Rayleigh held the knife in one hand, his eyes behind the frameless glasses flashing with deep light, his hair flying up with momentum, his eyes adding a bit of stern oppression. No comment. Golden light rose from Zhongguo's body again, and he turned into a golden Buddha, posing an attacking posture. Rayleigh took a deep breath and his tone became cold. Pushing our Roger pirates to attract the Golden Lion's attention is a good move. I even suspect that this war is part of your Navy's plan. You let the two strongest pirate groups on this sea go to war without making any noise, Sengoku. With this plan and wisdom, you really deserve to be a wise general of the Navy. Sengoku narrowed his eyes. The two looked at each other for a moment. They shot out from the spot at the same time. Dog devouring red lotus. Boom. The surging magma fist turned into a scorching giant dog, blooming magnificently like a red lotus. The red light almost occupied all the vision in front of him, causing the surrounding navy to retreat in fear. Moonlight double hunting. The domineering giant axe rolled up a fierce hurricane, and the cross-shaped axe blade turned into a slash, which suddenly chopped the magma giant dog that was rushing towards him. The magma exploded and splashed, dripping onto the deck of the warship and emitting hot black smoke. The dark red liquid magma slowly slid down the double axes. Jabba, who was wearing a black ponytail and sunglasses, looked solemnly at the young Navy man who walked out of the black smoke, and said with emotion, "Magma. The Navy has really produced a group of remarkable young people in recent years. If you were hit by an attack like that just now, I guess even your heart would be pierced." Sakazuki walked out expressionlessly in military boots, half of his body had turned into surging magma. "Scrubba Jabba, the third person in Roger's pirate group," he said coldly. "This is the burial place of your Roger pirates." Jabba smiled, and the two axes in his hands collided with each other, making a clanging sound, and said, "That's not necessarily true. Protect the Oro Jackson. Damn, this guy is too flexible. He is a natural type." On the Oro Jackson, Borsellino's figure sometimes dispersed into countless photons, and sometimes gathered into a human shape, and was tightly entangled by Spencer, Bulma Lin, Colonel Mugulian and several other fighters of the Roger pirates. Dang! The Ain Kume sword blocked the harpoon that Sambal stabbed from behind, and the flying sparks illuminated Borsellino's face wearing sunglasses. He looked at the panting fishman in front of him with some surprise, scratched his head with a headache, and said slowly, "It turned out to be a fishman warrior. Roger's pirate group is really terrible, and each crew member is as strong as a monster." "Shut up. No way. You bastard." Several fighters were so angry that their faces turned red in an instant, and they attacked Borsellino frantically. "Ha ha 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 Roger. Come on, let's have a good fight. Damn Garp, you broke my front teeth." On the wreckage of the pirate ship floating on the sea, two figures that seemed to be wrapped in a black and red lightning storm collided heavily like a meteor hitting the earth. Iron fists and long swords pierced the atmosphere. Bombardment from a distance. A ball of black and red energy compressed to the extreme twisted and intertwined wildly between the two, erupting into a circle of terrifying air waves that swept across the world. The world was directly deprived of its color. Tens of meters high waves rose on the sea, and the clouds were shattered, radiating out for several kilometers. Just as the two were deadlocked in midair. "Ha ha ha ha. Vice Admiral Garp, I'll help you." A hot-blooded middle school voice suddenly sounded. I saw a tall and thin figure leaping up from the dog-headed warship, holding a sharp ice spear in his hand, and stabbed at Roger fiercely. Roger raised his eyebrows and was about to make a move. Unexpectedly, Garp next to him was faster than him. "Kuzan, you kid, get out of the way. Don't get in the way. Roger belongs to me." He roared and punched. Huh. Kuzan was stunned. Before he could react, Garp's fist had already enlarged rapidly in the reflection of his pupil. Kuzan. Boom. He was blasted into the sea by Garp's punch like a cannonball. With a swish, the sea surface within a radius of 2 kilometers was suddenly frozen, and everything in sight turned snow-white. Ice crystals spun and spread, freezing all the warships and the Oro Jackson in place. The sea surface is frozen. Major General Kuzan is too strong. He is fighting for the battlefield for us. Kill. Seeing this scene, the Navy on the warship was stunned at first, and then immediately reacted, drawing their swords, jumping off the warship, and stepping on the ice to kill the Roger pirates. Chapter 109 – The Loser's Excuse. Kuzan grinned and climbed out of the hole in the ice, looking at this scene in a daze. Teams of Navy soldiers passed by him and attacked the Oro Jackson with murderous intent. Although they had surrounded Roger's pirate ship before, because they were in the sea, the warships squeezed each other, causing chaos and various inconveniences in the camp. There were even Navy soldiers in the front row climbing ropes to connect the strings and trying to attack the pirate ship, killing the sky and the earth in a tragic way, but the Navy soldiers in the back row could only stand the embarrassing scene of queuing there and staring blankly. But now it's different. The sea is frozen into ice, and they finally have a battlefield to stand on. And the bottom of the Roger pirates' ship is also frozen in the ice. They can't escape. Major General Kuzan is so strong. He is worthy of being as famous as Vice Admiral Darren. He actually came up with such a way to break the situation. The Navy soldiers rushed quickly, and when they passed by Kuzan, they gave him a thumbs up and praised him with admiration. Kuzan was stunned at first, then scratched his head and laughed embarrassedly. Ha 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 ha, that's not the case. Dash 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 dash. The icy wind slapped his cheeks, scratching his skin painfully. Darren's figure turned into a red aurora and whizzed through the air at high speed. The black clouds kept retreating, and the shouting and killing sounds on the battlefield in the distance behind him kept weakening, and finally disappeared completely. Ha 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 ha. Navy brat, don't run away if you dare. Aren't you arrogant? The violent laughter of the Golden Lion came from behind, approaching him. You prepared an unprecedented storm for me, but now you are running away like a wild dog. It's ridiculous. Ha ha ha. While speaking, the Golden Lion's two swords came out at the same time, and dozens of golden sword beams were cut out in an instant, covering the Navy Vice Admiral in front of him. Darren's slightly pale face changed slightly, and a strange red light surged in the depths of his pupils. The magnetic field surrounding his body suddenly increased. The air exploded, and the speed of the Navy Vice Admiral's flight suddenly climbed, and he narrowly escaped the coverage of the Golden Lion's slash. Swish, swish, swish. The sea within a radius of 1 kilometer was cut into a terrifying mesh structure, and a huge amount of sea water rushed into the sky. The next moment, Darren rushed out of the water curtain in a panic and continued to flee frantically. But a mocking smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and he laughed unscrupulously. So what? In the end, you still lost, Golden Lion. Your so-called invincible flying fleet was completely wiped out by me twice. Your ridiculous ambition to rule the world was destroyed by me. Darren looked back at Golden Lion, his face showing no sign of hiding his mockery. Your life is destined to be a huge failure. Back in the Valley of Gods, your Captain Rox lost to Garp and Roger. You can't beat Whitebeard, and you are far inferior to Roger. So you can only pursue a huge flying fleet or look for ancient weapons like a soft egg. How can a scum like you be on par with Roger? They are both ancient weapons, but Roger boasted that he doesn't need that kind of stuff. This is the gap between you and him. You will never be as good as Roger in your life. You are like a joke, becoming Roger's background board, and you can only watch him go further step by step. Darren's words were like an extremely sharp sword, fiercely inserted into the depths of the Golden Lion's soul, making him feel unprecedented pain. Boundless anger gushed out of his chest like a volcanic eruption, and his bloodshot eyes almost spewed fire. You ignorant brat! He screamed at the top of his lungs. Roger is just a stupid idiot. Why can he be compared with me? He has great power but no intention of ruling the world. He can't even be called a real pirate. Golden Lion was furious, and his blood-red eyeballs were about to pop out of his eye sockets, as if Darren's words had pierced his pain. It's true that he regarded Roger as his lifelong enemy, but at the same time, he would never allow anyone to say that he was not as good as Roger. In his opinion, Roger's unruly life, his casual, unambitious attitude and adventure were not what a pirate did. These are all losers' excuses. Darren laughed loudly. In the final analysis, you are a loser, Golden Lion. If I'm not mistaken, you don't dare to use your domineering hockey now, right? Because there is a rudder stuck in your head now. You are afraid that once you burst out your momentum with all your strength, it will cause some irreversible consequences. Golden Lion's face froze, and he gritted his teeth tightly. His expression was extremely ferocious and gloomy. Confirmed by his expression, Darren laughed even more wantonly. So, you are just a loser. You have lost even the domineering hockey. What qualifications do you have to rule the world? Damn it. Golden Lion roared violently, and his facial muscles twisted. Even without using Conqueror Hockey, I can easily kill you, little brat. Come on then. Ha 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 ha. Darren's hands turned into black dragon claws, and he grabbed fiercely in the air, and then flew out again without even looking. Swish, swish. Two black claw rays suddenly shot out and attacked the Golden Lion. The Golden Lion swung his sword to smash the claws and chased after him again. Darren kid, do you think you are smart? Do you think you have everything under control? Then did you expect that you would die under my sword today? As long as I kill you, no one in this sea can stop me. The clue to the ancient weapon is with Roger. I will be able to force it out of him sooner or later. A desire for destruction and paranoia surged into the Golden Lion's brain. I haven't lost yet. As long as I kill this Navy kid. If I find the ancient weapon again, this world will eventually crawl at my feet. However, at this time, the slightly playful voice of the Navy Vice Admiral came again. Who do you think released the clue to the ancient weapon? As soon as the voice fell, the Golden Lion was struck by lightning. A thought suddenly flashed through his mind, like thunder in a dry land. Could it be? His pupils shrank and his face changed drastically. In an instant, he thought of many questions. This storm was planned by Darren, but how did he know that he would go to war with Roger's pirate group? The battle took place in the Edwall Sea. Roger holds clues to ancient weapons. This information was obtained from the underground world. The Navy's ambush. Ambush. Wait. Golden Lion suddenly looked up, staring at the back of the Vice Admiral in front of him with twisted and hateful eyes, wishing to cut him into pieces. Everything was the conspiracy of this kid. He destroyed everything he had. I'm going to kill you. The next second. Golden Lion's crazy roar, filled with boundless murderous intent, soared into the sky. Chapter 110 Run, Run. New World, a certain sea area. The sun is shining and the sea is clear. A pirate ship with a skull flag sailed steadily on the blue sea, and an excited laugh came from the deck. Ha 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 Captain, we've made a fortune this time. I never thought that the treasure map was real. The deck of the pirate ship was filled with boxes of gold and silver treasures, shining brightly under the sun. Dozens of pirates surrounded the treasure in front of them, their faces flushed with excitement, and they threw colorful gold and silver coins into the air like crazy, looking like they were forgetting everything. Ha ha ha, well done, little guys. The captain of the pirate group with a beard sat at the bow, opened his arms and laughed. This is just the beginning. As long as you continue to follow me, whether it's money, women, or fame and status, everything is not a dream. Ha 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 ha. Just as the pirates laughed happily, the helmsman suddenly made a puzzled sound. Huh, what is that? It seems like something is approaching in the sky. Is that a person? The first reaction of the crowd was disbelief. How could there be someone in the sky? People can't fly. Their eyes suddenly widened, staring at the sky in the distance. A bloody figure suddenly shuttled out from the sea of clouds and dived towards the sea at an astonishing speed. What is that? It seems to be a navy. Wait, he is flying in our direction. Damn it, prepare to fire. A panicked voice came out, and the pirates hurriedly controlled the cannons on the ship, trying to aim at the figure. No. He's too fast. He's coming. Before the pirates could react, Darren's bloody figure had already dived past the sea, stirring up gusts of wind. The pirates froze in place, but the huge stone hanging in their hearts was put down, and they secretly breathed a sigh of relief. The aura exuded by that guy was as strong as a demon god, and they could not deal with it at all. Fortunately, that guy didn't even look at them. But at this moment, Darren kid, you can't run away. Swish. Swish. Several golden sword energies suddenly broke through the sea of clouds, like a slash from the sky, tearing the sea apart. The pirates were struck by lightning. They stood there in a daze, and the light traces of the golden sword approaching at a high speed were reflected in their pupils. It's over. This was the last thought in their minds. Boom. The pirate ship was directly cut into several pieces, and then a huge explosion occurred. The flames mixed with black smoke rolled into the sky. 1 second later, a mad golden lion rushed out of the billowing black smoke, staring at the fleeing back of the vice admiral with bloodshot eyes, and roared viciously. I will never let you go. Accelerate again. 2 figures, one red and one gold, turned into 2 glittering lights, and rushed in the sky at a speed that could not be captured by the naked eye. You chased me. A few minutes later, when passing by a deserted island. Lion Chikiri ya. Dozens of crescent-shaped sword chi swept through the void, completely covering the figure of the vice admiral. Darren was unable to dodge, and a long-range slash hit him. He groaned, and a large piece of blood exploded on his back. The rest the sword energy swept to the distance, and several hundreds of meters high mountains were directly cut off, and the mountaintops slowly collapsed along the cut. Boom. The whole deserted island was shaking under the collapse of the mountain, making a terrifying sound that shook the earth and startled the birds flying all over the sky. Seeing that the damn Navy kid was injured again, Jinshizi couldn't help laughing crazily. Ha 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 ha, I want to see how long you can escape. Suddenly, a sense of playfulness of cat and mouse rose in his heart. The tenacious vitality of this kid surprised him a little, but that was all. Jinshizi could clearly see that the flying speed of the Navy kid was getting slower and slower. His face was extremely pale, his military uniform was stained with blood, and he was gasping for breath. It was clearly the end of his strength and he couldn't hold on for long. This also meant that he was killed by himself. It was just a matter of time. In that case, let's have fun with you. When he thought of this, the corner of the golden lion's mouth raised a cruel arc. The violent blood filled his pupils, and the killing intent that made people shudder was filled in them. There were waves of strange swelling pain in his head, but he didn't care. The rationality in his eyes dissipated bit by bit. Instead, there was an uncontrollable, volcanic desire for destruction. At this moment, there was only one idea in the golden lion's mind. Torture that Navy kid, to death. Ha 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 ha. Run away. Run away. I'll see when you can run away. Where can you run away? Ha 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 ha. At the Etwall Sea. Mr. Rayleigh. The ship has been repaired. On the Oro Jackson, Buggy's head was cut off from his body by a Navy, and he screamed in fear. Rayleigh, who was fighting with Zhang Guo, narrowed his eyes, and his aura suddenly surged. Dense black and red lightning climbed up his long sword, and he held the hilt with both hands at the same time, and slashed at Zhang Guo with a sword. Big Buddha, punch. Zhang Guo, who turned into a golden Buddha, also burst out his own domineering aura, gritted his teeth and roared and punched. Boom. The long sword and the Buddha's fist collided in the air, without touching each other, but a huge storm was brewing in the air. After a stalemate of 1 second, the black and red energy gas suddenly erupted. The surging air waves spread out in all directions, lifting the frozen ice surface like waves, breaking it piece by piece. With the help of this recoil force, Rayleigh's figure jumped back nimbly and landed steadily on the Oro Jackson. He flashed towards Borsellino and swung a sword horizontally. Pluto Rayleigh, this is really tricky. Borsellino muttered, and his figure spread into countless golden photons. While avoiding Rayleigh's sword, he gathered into a human figure on the warship of Sengoku again. Roger. It's time to go. After forcing Borsellino back on the pirate ship with a sword, Rayleigh looked anxiously at Roger who was fighting with Garp in the distance. But I haven't had enough fun yet. Roger shouted with some dissatisfaction. If you don't come back, we will all die here. Rayleigh was so angry that veins appeared on his forehead, and he gritted his teeth. Damn it. Roger cursed. He clenched the famous sword in his hand, and his momentum suddenly increased by several points. The domineering aura that was far more powerful than Rayleigh and Sengoku seemed to roar out of his body endlessly, causing a blood-red captain's cloak to flutter fiercely. The fierce fighting spirit rose in the eyes of this legendary pirate. "Come on, Garp. Let's use this sword, to fight to the death." Roger stepped on the ice, creating dense cracks in the thick ice, and raised his head. The dense black and red lightning, in a huge radial shape, surrounded the long sword in his hand. The long sword was dragged, showing a bold posture of drawing the sword. Feeling Roger's breath at this moment, Garp's face was more solemn than ever. "God avoid!" Roger roared. Garp's pupils shrank. It was that move. The strange and undefensible swordsmanship. Garp, who had suffered a loss in front of Roger's sword before, gritted his teeth and retreated quickly. However, the next second, he seemed to see some absurd scene, and his eyes stared out of his eye sockets. Swish! Roger slashed with his sword. The domineering black and red sword light slashed not at himself, but at the warship where Sengoku was. "Ha ha ha ha. You got fooled, Garp." After slashing with his sword, Roger made a face at Garp and retreated triumphantly to the Oro Jackson. "You bastard! You cheated!" Garp blushed and cursed. The sword of the ghost retreated roared, giving people unparalleled pressure. Sengoku's face changed drastically, but there was a warship under his feet, and he couldn't dodge at all, so he could only bite the bullet and grit his teeth to meet it. Borsalino. Got it. Golden light rose. Boom. The black and red sword light hit the warship with dazzling golden light, and a purgatory-like storm broke out. The ice surface frozen by Kuzan finally couldn't bear the pressure of so many strong men fighting, and suddenly collapsed, revealing the turbulent sea surface. The navy on the ice surface immediately became chaotic, and countless people fell into the water. The warship was squeezed by the broken ice layer and was in chaos. "Ha ha ha ha, goodbye navy, I can't die here." He raised his saber and laughed heroically in the rain. "My voyage is not over yet." As the voice fell, a pitch-black cannon suddenly appeared from the stern of the Oro Jackson. The dazzling white light quickly gathered in it. Boom! A cannon fired. The surging air cannons broke through the sea, crushed the broken ice, and set off a violent storm on the sea. In Garp's eyes that were about to burst. In Sakaski's gloomy eyes. Under the helpless expressions of countless Navy officers. The broken Oro Jackson suddenly rose into the sky, stirring up a large area of seawater. It was like a seabird that had broken through the wind and rain, flying freely towards the distance. 2 chapters are presented, asking for everything. Chapter 111 He will run away if there are too many people. The sea surface was surging and the waves were surging. The warship was shaking continuously, and the voices of rescue came out one after another. Hurry up and save people. So many people fell into the water. Don't be washed away by the waves. The strong wind blew away the smoke and dust, and the main battleship reappeared. The entire bow of the warship had been completely destroyed, revealing a mottled keel structure, and it looked like it could sink at any time. Sengoku and Borsalino took a defensive posture on the deck, raising their hands with their palms facing forward. Dust blew around their bodies, and the Navy soldiers behind them staggered. Damn it! Seeing that the broken pirate ship had disappeared from sight, Sengoku cursed with red eyes and clenched his fists unwillingly. They finally got such a chance to surround Roger's pirate group, but they could only miss it like this. And now he saw it. Roger's last knife was not a bullshit divine dodge at all. In addition to scaring Garp to let him retreat, the knife he slashed in the air was to delay himself and Borsalino, buying time for their pirate ship to escape. Damn it, Roger, that bastard, he actually tricked me. Garp was also jumping up and down, and hurriedly boarded his dog-headed warship and ordered his subordinates to set sail. Kuzan, are you coming? Just as the dog-headed warship was setting sail and preparing to chase the Roger pirates in the direction of their escape, Garp suddenly seemed to remember something and turned his head to ask Kuzan, who was standing on a piece of floating ice. Kuzan's face darkened and hesitantly said, "Vice Admiral Garp, you won't beat me again, will you?" Garp gritted his teeth and said, "Come if you want. I'm coming." Kuzan immediately became energetic, boarded the warship in a few flashes, and walked to Garp's side with a smile. Sengoku, I'll leave this to you to clear the field. I'm going to chase Roger, that bastard. Garp threw down a sentence without looking back, and the warship was at full speed and quickly sailed away. A hint of helplessness flashed across Sengoku's face, and he opened his mouth but said nothing. He knew that the ship of Roger's pirate group could be made to fly several miles in a short distance with one air cannon, and with the extremely fast speed of the ship itself. Garp could not catch up at all. But since Garp wanted to chase, he could not stop him. The most important task at hand was to rescue the Navy soldiers who fell into the water and arrest the remnants of the flying pirate group. General Sengoku, I think we must set out immediately to hunt down Roger's pirate group. Just then, Sakazuki, who was full of murderous aura, quickly boarded the warship and said to Sengoku with a gloomy look. Sengoku frowned and shook his head. Leave Roger to Garp. Many of our warships are seriously damaged, which greatly affects the speed. Chasing after him will not help. While speaking, a haze that could not be dissolved flashed in the depths of his eyes, and he did not hold too much hope in his heart. For more novels 165,139 join. Again and again. Again and again. Since the end of the God Valley War, the Navy headquarters has launched countless large-scale operations against the Roger pirates. Among them, the actions led by Garp alone have forced the Roger pirates into desperate situations many times. But for some reason, every time when the Navy thought they had a sure win, the Roger pirates always found a way to escape. This time, it was the same. If it weren't for the Navy, Darren intervened and created that earth-shaking sea in the storm. Roger's pirate group is estimated to have been completely defeated under the siege of the Golden Lion flying fleet. That is a situation of inevitable defeat. No matter how strong Roger is, it is impossible to turn the tide in such a desperate situation. But what happened in the end? The super sea storm created by Dragon smashed the Golden Lion's flying pirate fleet to pieces. But what about Roger's pirate group? Except for the damage to the surface of the pirate ship's hull, it was almost painless. This can no longer be described by luck. Perhaps, is there some mysterious power, or fate, that has been helping Roger? Otherwise, if we analyze it based on objective evidence and facts, we can't explain this weird scene at all. No matter how difficult it is to conquer pirates, with the power of the Navy, they should have succeeded after so many conquests, right? No matter how strong Roger is, can he be stronger than rocks? No matter how elite the members of Roger's pirate group are, can they have the strong lineup of Rock's pirate group back then? But every time they came back empty-handed. This is simply inexplicable. Thinking of this, a chill ran down Zhongguo's back, and his fists clenched subconsciously. Hearing Zhongguo's answer, Sakazuki quickly reacted, his face becoming increasingly gloomy. What about Darren? Zhongguo took a deep breath and said in a deep voice. Both Darren and Golden Lion have powerful long-distance flight capabilities, and the speed of the warship is simply not enough to provide timely support. His eyes were full of helplessness, and he subconsciously looked at Borsellino next to him. Borsellino raised his hands and said, "As for long-distance flight, I can't do it for the time being." But the corners of his mouth suddenly raised a teasing arc. Let's not worry too much about the safety of Lieutenant General Darren. Sakazuki narrowed his eyes and said coldly. Borsellino, what do you mean? Borsellino pretended to be panicked and took 2 steps back, waving his hand. Your expression is terrible, Sakazuki. I don't mean anything, I just want to make a fact clear. He stroked the stubble on his chin, first pointed at Sakazuki, and then pointed at himself. In the Battle of Marineford, you, me, plus Kuzan and Darren, the 4 of us joined forces but couldn't keep the guy Golden Lion. Sakazuki's arm began to emit a hot red light, and billowing black smoke rose. Borsellino, I'm not in the mood to play tricks with you now. I know the combat power of Golden Lion better than anyone else. The Battle of Marineford, I was there too. He stared at Borsellino coldly, his heart filled with bored anger. The Navy finally seized a golden opportunity, but Roger's pirate group ran away like this. He was furious. Borsellino, because I know his combat power, I know that Darren can't take him down by himself. No, no, no. Borsellino smiled and said. Sakaski, do you really understand Darren's current strength? Sakaski was stunned. Immediately, a look of disbelief and astonishment appeared in his eyes. Borsellino turned around and waved his hand. We couldn't take down the Golden Lion in Marineford, not because the four of us couldn't beat him together. It's because he can fly. When Sengoku heard this, he seemed to have figured something out, and his eyes lit up slightly. Borsellino stretched his body and yawned. If you want to defeat the Golden Lion, it's useless to have more people. He turned around, knocked his head, and gave Sakaski a playful smile. Don't forget, the Golden Lion is a very insidious and cunning guy. If there are more people, he will run away. Hearing this, Zangguo and Sakaski were shocked. Chapter 112 Chase. A new world, a deserted island. Chop. A magnificent golden sword energy rose up among the mountains with unstoppable momentum and swept towards the distant sky. The heavy sea of clouds was suddenly shattered, cutting out a huge bottomless groove. A mountain hundreds of meters high in front of them was cut in half from the middle, presenting an extremely smooth cut. The mountain peaks roared with a deafening roar, and countless boulders turned into a surging torrent, constantly collapsing and rolling down from the mountains, causing a small earthquake. Dust rose to the sky. A blood-stained figure shot out from the broken mountain, collided and rolled on the ground and the mountain wall for several rounds, and then barely stabilized his body and flew up again. It was Darren. Ha 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 ha. How long can you hold on, Navy kid? The interlaced sword lights hissed, cutting through all obstacles in the mountain, and the crazy figure of the Golden Lion followed closely, biting the Navy Vice Admiral tightly. Are you almost at your limit? Being able to hold on for so long under my pursuit, Darren kid. You are already proud of this sea. The Golden Lion launched a crazy attack, trying to intercept the escape route of the Navy Vice Admiral, while grinning wantonly. Swish swish swish. As he spoke, he raised his hand and slashed out a dozen more hissing golden sword beams. Boom. A huge cloud of dust exploded again among the mountains, and the terrifying sound of the earth shaking continued to spread, causing all kinds of strange things on the island to all the rare animals trembled. 2 seconds later, Darren staggered out, his face as pale as paper, his eyes red and soaring into the sky. On his back, there was another knife wound that seemed to be deep enough to see the bone. A large amount of blood fell in the air. Seeing this scene, the Golden Lion smiled even more ferociously, his muscular face was full of violent killing intent and the playfulness of cat catching mouse. This kid is almost unable to hold on. Under such injuries, even I can't hold on. When I thought of the miserable scene that this kid who ruined his ambitions and plans would be chopped into pieces by himself, the Golden Lion's face flushed with excitement, and the hand holding the knife couldn't help but tremble slightly. Run away. Run away with all your strength. Navy kid. In the end, you will find that no one can save you. Waves of intense pain and numbness came from the rudder on his head, making him feel a splitting headache and bulging eyeballs, but he didn't care at all. As long as this kid doesn't run to the Navy headquarters or the holy land of Mary Geoise, no one can save him no matter where he is. Thinking of this, the Golden Lion accelerated again. The two figures were like a red and a gold phantom light, quickly passing through the sky, the sea, between islands, ports, mountains. At an astonishing speed. They passed through one sea after another and flew over one country after another. A shocking chase that made countless people unbelievable. Half a day later. Zangguo led the headquarters, elite fleet and returned to the Navy headquarters Marineford at the fastest speed. Several giant escort ships from the Impeldown city had already received relevant notifications and were waiting at the Oval Naval Port. In the Battle of Etwall, although the shocking storm destroyed the Golden Lion's flying pirate fleet, there were still many fish that escaped and survived the storm. The remnants of the flying pirates, a total of more than 2,000 people, were all arrested and detained by the Navy. After hurriedly handing over the arrested remnants of the flying pirates to the relevant personnel of the Impeldown, the dusty Sengoku took Sakaski and Borsellino and rushed to the marshal's mansion without stopping. As soon as the door of the highest military conference room was opened, a group of figures who had been waiting for a long time suddenly stood up from their seats and saluted together. General Sengoku. Sengoku waved his hand, and the murderous aura lingering after the war still remained on his body, and he walked quickly into the conference room. Marshal Kong. He saluted Kong on the main seat with a serious face and said in a deep voice, "I'm sorry, I failed to complete the task of destroying the Roger pirates. Please punish me." Kong, who was smoking a cigar, raised his head and shook his head. "It's okay, Sengoku. The flying fleet under the command of the Golden Lion has been completely destroyed, and the strategic task of this war has been basically achieved. As for the Roger pirates..." He paused and sighed as if helpless. "You and I know that group of guys are not so easy to deal with. As the Supreme Commander of the Navy, Kong knows the difficulty of the Roger pirates better than anyone else. Especially in the chase battle on the sea, their special pirate ship makes the Navy fleet with countless strong ships and powerful guns helpless. The Oro Jackson is not an ordinary pirate ship. This ship is a legendary warship built by the shipwrights of the Seven Waters City with great effort. Because the hull material is very special, the extremely precious tree atom is used as the main keel structure, which achieves unprecedented lightness while also having a sturdiness level far beyond that of warships. As a result, the speed of the Oro Jackson is even faster than that of naval warships with power systems. In addition, the ship is also equipped with a short-distance flight device similar to a propeller. In addition, everyone in the Roger Pirates is a well-known pirate in the New World, and the difficulty of arresting them is far greater than any other pirate group in this sea. This small pirate group may be far inferior to Whitebeard and Golden Lion in terms of military strength and power. But in terms of flexibility and escape, it is definitely the top level in the sea. I have read the relevant war reports. The responsibility is not yours, Zhongguo." Gongji Yukong saw Zhongguo's self-blaming face and comforted him. "Even if I were in your position, I couldn't change the final result. Take a seat first." Zhongguo gritted his teeth and found a seat to sit down. "What is the situation with Darren now?" he asked anxiously. "Xiao He, you tell me." Gangji Yukong smoked a cigar with a frown. "Staff officer," he nodded and said solemnly. "Darren is running away, and the Golden Lion is biting him tightly. The two of them started an exaggerated chase." While speaking, she pointed to the simulated sand table on the conference table. "This is the Atwal Sea." She moved her finger along the red dots marked on the sand table, and finally landed in the sea near the entrance to the New World, Fishman Island. "This is the latest intelligence. Darren and the location where the two Golden Lions appeared." Warring States looked at the sand table, and his pupils suddenly shrank. The dense red dots on the sea chart sand table presented a huge parabola, from the Etwal Sea, all the way to the Fishman Island Sea, almost circling half of the New World. "What is Darren doing? Lost his way?" Chapter 113 Why Should I Escape? Warring States looked at Darren's escape route on the simulated sand table and couldn't help but exclaimed in surprise. From this route, Darren seemed to be lost, running around the entire New World. There is no rule at all, no logic. Although it is very common to get lost in the New World, after all, the sea area known as the Pirate Graveyard is extremely dangerous. Even if it is a Navy warship, if it does not follow a fixed safe route, similar situations often occur. But with Warring States' understanding of Darren, that brat will never make such a low-level mistake. What is going on? Zhongguo looked at Staff Officer Crane anxiously. Staff Officer Crane shook his head, a hint of helplessness flashing in his eyes. I don't know either. The route Darren chose has no rules, as if it was just to go around in circles. Go around in circles. Zhongguo was stunned. Sakaski frowned. Borisolino smiled but said nothing. The only thing that can be confirmed now is that the two of them are chasing each other at a very fast speed, and they will pass an island almost every few minutes. Gangji Yukong pinched his temple at this time, and said with a headache. Our headquarters can't grasp their timely movements at all. The routes on this simulated sand table are all reported by witnesses on various islands or routes. Bulu Bulu. Bulu Bulu. At this time, the military Den Den Mushi placed on the conference table suddenly rang. Staff Officer Crane immediately connected the communication. A nervous voice trembled from the military Den Den Mushi. Report. The latest intelligence, someone saw Vice Admiral Darren passing through Niwo Island. He has been seriously injured. As soon as these words came out, the faces of all the naval generals present changed slightly. Zhongguo's expression also became extremely solemn, and cold sweat broke out on his palms. Darren was seriously injured. What is the situation now? How long can he hold on? However, just when everyone was anxious, the military Den Den Mushi rang again. Report. Vice Admiral Darren has arrived at the port of Falls. According to the witnesses, his condition is very bad. The attack of the Golden Lion cut the port in half. Everyone took a deep breath. The port of Falls is a large transit and transportation port in the New World. Even when the Navy is transporting military supplies to various branches in the New World, it sometimes transits and supplies here. But what surprised them more was not this, but the speed of Darren and Golden Lion. They subconsciously looked at the huge simulation sand table. At this time, the adjutant of the Crane staff had already marked the two nearest locations with red marks. The speed is too fast. It's simply unimaginable. A rear admiral couldn't help but exclaimed. From the waters of Fishman Island to the two latest reported locations, if it is a Navy warship, it will take at least an hour to travel. But now it has only been less than 5 minutes, and the two guys have crossed such a long distance. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they would not believe it at all. When they thought of this, the faces of the naval generals present could not help but show a deep sense of powerlessness. This kind of ultra-long distance chase is not something they can intervene in at all. Damn it! Zhongguo clenched his fist, slammed his fist on the conference table with red eyes, and panted. Sakazuki said coldly with a gloomy face. So we can only sit here helplessly and wait for things to develop. There was a dead silence. No one could answer his question. Because it was indeed the case. The speed of the warship could not catch up with the flying speed of Darren and Golden Lion. Darren's escape route had no rules and could not be predicted at all. There was no other way except waiting helplessly. What I can't figure out is why Darren didn't retreat directly to the headquarters. Gang Kong suddenly said. Everyone in the conference room was shocked at the same time. Yes, even if he lost his way in the New World, Vice Admiral Darren should have a permanent pointer pointing to Marineford in his hand. As long as he returns to the direction of the Navy headquarters, he doesn't even need to arrive in Marineford, and the combat power of their headquarters can go to support him. Because he wants to kill Golden Lion. Zhongguo gritted his teeth. Hearing his words, the naval generals present all changed color, extremely shocked, and their faces were full of disbelief. Vice Admiral Darren, he wants to kill the Golden Lion by himself. How is this possible? This is something that even Admiral Warren and Vice Admiral Garp can't do. Is that so? Gang Kong frowned, and his resolute expression did not show much change, and his eyes drooped. Because you are afraid that the Golden Lion will escape, you don't run to the headquarters. He whispered softly. At this time, the others also figured out the joints and gradually reacted. The conference room fell into silence again. Darren's approach may be correct, but can the Golden Lion really be killed? The Navy generals were in doubt. They all recognized Darren's strength and record. But he was the Golden Lion Shiki after all. The legendary pirate. He was as famous as Roger and Whitebeard. Admiral Sengoku and Vice Admiral Garp led the Navy's elite fleet, with so many powerful forces, but they were unable to defeat Roger's pirate group. Can Vice Admiral Darren really kill the Golden Lion by himself? Just then. Brew brew. The slightly hurried call of the military Den Den Mushi sounded again, breaking the stiff atmosphere. Steelbone Sora directly connected the signal. Speak. A nervous voice followed. Report. The latest information. Vice Admiral Darren has left the New World waters. He has entered the Calm Belt. Calm Belt. Everyone subconsciously looked up at the simulated sand table, and after locking onto the location of the comm belt, they were shocked. Zhongguo stood up suddenly, his eyes widened. Sakaski's expression changed slightly. Staff Officer Yi's pupils shrank. Gang Ji Yukong took a deep puff of his cigar. What no one noticed was that his hand holding the cigar was shaking slightly. They all knew where Darren was going. The gazes fell on a certain position on the sand table. The comm belt. This shocking and crazy chase has lasted for a day and a night, and there is no sign of stopping. Ha 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 ha. It's useless no matter where you run to, Darren kid. The Golden Lion frantically chased the blood-stained back of the Navy Vice Admiral, and his two swords slashed one after another in the air. The place where the rudder was inserted on his forehead was getting more and more painful. The disturbed magnetic field caused a weak arc to flash on the surface of the rudder, which forced the Golden Lion to maintain the armament Haki for a long time. The excessive consumption of Haki made him clearly feel that his physical strength was rapidly declining. But he had no scruples. There was not much rationality left in his expression, and only violent and cruel killing intent flashed in his pupils. It's almost there. This damn Navy kid can't hold on any longer. With such a lot of bleeding and injuries, and flying a very long distance. I'm about to run out of physical strength, and this kid's consumption will only be greater than mine. Two figures flew past the sea surface at a high speed, one in front and one behind. Sometimes, huge sea king-like creatures roared from the sea surface in the windless belt, turned into shadows covering the sky, opened their bloody mouths and bit down at the Golden Lion. However, under the crazy slashing of the number one swordsman of the two-sword style, he was cut into pieces of meat and blood in an instant. Ha 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 ha. Another sharp golden sword light slashed the back of the Navy Vice Admiral from a distance, blasting a large blood mist and causing the latter to stagger violently, with blood oozing from his mouth. Seeing this, the Golden Lion laughed even more crazily. Although he would occasionally wonder why this Navy kid could survive after enduring so many slashes from him, this thought only flashed through his mind and did not leave too many traces. What is there to hesitate about? The injury is real, the bleeding is real, and he is really running away. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. I can kill this bastard kid alive. No matter what, I can't miss this opportunity. Soon he passed through this vast and endless sea. The cool sea breeze blew in the face, and the originally calm sea surface gradually rippled with undulating waves. They have left the doldrums. It's time. The Golden Lion laughed grimly and raised his hand to swing the sword. Swish. The invisible force spread out, and the sea surface was suddenly engulfed by some strange force, and suddenly set off a raging wave. A large area of sea water swarmed up, like layers of tsunamis, like a huge monster with an unclear face, brazenly swallowing the bloody Vice Admiral in front. Lion's might, earth roll. The sea water poured down like a collapsed city wall. The Vice Admiral gritted his teeth, as if he was about to burst out his last strength. His face turned pale, and the speed of his body suddenly increased by several points. Escaped from the raging tsunami by chance. But at this moment. Ha 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 ha, you're dead. A vast golden sword light shattered the heavy tsunami curtain wall, and slashed the unprepared Vice Admiral into the ground of a deserted island below. Boom. The surging mud waves rushed into the sky, and the ground of half of the island was almost torn apart. The earth-shaking movement continued to spread, startling countless birds. The Golden Lion's eyes became more and more crazy, flashing violent scarlet, and swooped down in an instant. The center of the deserted island. The smoke and dust filled the air. In the huge sword scars lying on the ground, the figure of the Vice Admiral of the Navy stood up shakily, and blood dripped from his body with scars crisscrossing, looking extremely tragic. Seeing the miserable appearance of this damn Navy kid, the Golden Lion grinned with confidence, ha 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 ha. Are you not going to run away, little Navy devil? He landed on the ground, holding the knife in both hands, and boundless killing intent surged out. Excessive excitement and madness made the muscles on his face twisted, as terrifying as a devil. The Vice Admiral of the Navy gasped as if he couldn't hear the words of the Golden Lion, lowered his head, and gasped heavily. The wind lingering with dust blew past, stirring the ends of his bloody hair. Why don't you run away? You keep running away. I haven't had enough fun yet. The golden lion laughed wantonly. Although his head hurt more and more, it was unbearable, and his forehead was bulging with centipede-like veins. But he didn't notice it at all. Finally. I was finally going to kill this guy. He was so excited that his whole body trembled. Why should I run away? The Vice Admiral of the Navy suddenly spoke lightly. The laughter of the golden lion stopped abruptly. He looked up at the Navy kid in astonishment. Darren stopped panting. He raised his head, and a meaningful smile suddenly appeared on his blood-stained face. Golden Lion, do you know where this is? Golden Lion was startled. A sense of extreme uneasiness suddenly surged into his mind. Because he couldn't see any fear of himself in the eyes of this Navy kid. He was actually laughing. The smile on his lips and the look he gave him were like a hunter looking at a beast caught in a trap. Why was he laughing? Where is this place? Golden Lion looked around in astonishment and confusion. Dense forests, deserted islands, seas. Such islands are everywhere in the world, countless. It's impossible to tell where this is. As for the route along the way, he didn't pay any attention to it at all. Rage and murderous intent had already occupied his mind. The only thought in his mind was to kill Darren. The exhaustion of a day and night of pursuit, the physical exhaustion of maintaining the armed color domineering all the time, plus the pain from the rudder on his head. He only knew that he had just passed through the doldrums. Darren took a deep breath. The fear and panic of fleeing all the way before had long disappeared, replaced by strong ambition and pride. He slowly opened his arms, as if embracing the familiar air and sea of this sea area, his eyes unruly. This is the North Sea. He grinned wantonly, revealing his teeth stained red with blood. My North Sea. As soon as the voice fell, a low and indifferent voice suddenly came from a very far distance. God's sanction. This chapter is not short, 2 in 1. Chapter 114. I was tricked. Almost at the moment when this voice sounded, the originally clear sky suddenly filled with thick clouds. Swish. A huge thunder suddenly tore through the sea of clouds, like a vast blue-white beam of light, striking the golden lion head-on with overwhelming force. The strong dazzling light briefly illuminated the entire world. The golden lion's pupils shrank. A strong sense of crisis surged into his heart. What is this? At the moment when the roar broke out, his figure floated up and quickly pulled back to try to avoid the lightning strike from the sky. However, at this moment, an unbelievable scene took place. The thunder that was originally striking vertically suddenly deviated halfway because of his retreat. The target was still the golden lion himself. How is this possible? Boom. The thunder hit with a bang, and a huge explosion suddenly broke out on the ground. The fire rose up in the billowing black smoke and quickly spread out in the jungle. Countless tall trees were ignited and then collapsed. Suddenly, a sharp sword light flashed in the fire. The fierce sword wind extinguished the flames. Damn! Golden Lion walked out of a charred pit with billowing black smoke, and a blood mark oozed from the corner of his mouth. His whole body was covered with a layer of dark armed color domineering, and it was clear that he had taken the blow just now. Thunder! How could it turn? He stared at the Vice Admiral in front of him with red eyes, and said in disbelief. Darren pointed to the rudder above his head, lit a cigar slowly, and smiled. That thing is the best lightning rod. Golden Lion's expression froze. A light blue lightning flashed in the void, and condensed into a figure beside Darren. He had two mustaches, a gloomy look, and stared at Golden Lion with fear. It was the flying squirrel. You're late. The flying squirrel's fingers flashed with dazzling lightning, and he said in a deep voice. Darren smiled and said, in order to consume his physical strength, I circled a few more times, otherwise your attack just now would not have been so easy to hit. The flying squirrel frowned, not feeling the slightest bit of luck because of the successful attack, staring at the Golden Lion with an extremely vigilant look. Is this the legendary pirate Golden Lion? It's a pity that you can hold on until now. Although he has not yet awakened his observation haki, he can still vaguely sense the terrifying oppression emanating from the Golden Lion. The terrifying threat of death made the flying squirrel feel like being stared at by a ferocious beast. It was creepy. He and this guy were not at the same level at all. As this thought came to his mind, the flying squirrel couldn't help but glance at Darren. The terrible injuries on the latter's body made him feel cold. He had been following the news of the Battle of Etwall. It has been a full day and night since the end of that battle. Darren and this terrifying guy fought all the way from the New World to the North Sea without any rest in between. This exaggerated chase is rare in the world. A natural mouse. The golden lion also saw the ability of the flying squirrel at this time, and sneered. The strongest, thunder fruit, in the natural system. I didn't expect it to fall into your hands, Darren kid. He suddenly laughed ferociously. So this is your backup plan. If that's all, I don't mind killing both of you. The moment the words fell, Golden Lion raised his hand and slashed with a knife. His attack was so fierce and swift that he could slash out with a great swordsman level, flying slash, with a casual strike. The magnificent golden sword light suddenly broke through the air, silently tore the earth, and roared towards Darren and the others. With the invincible vision of Golden Lion, he saw at a glance that although the kid with a mustache was quite good at developing devil fruits, he had not yet cultivated domineering power and was not enough to pose a threat to himself. Here it comes. The flying squirrel shouted coldly, raised his hand and blasted out a thunderbolt. The thunderbolt and the swordlight collided in midair, but after only a moment of stalemate, the thunderbolt was crushed by the golden swordlight and attacked Darren without any reduction. The corner of the golden lion's mouth curled up into a playful grin. With the injury of the Navy kid, he couldn't avoid his move at all. But the next moment, the golden lion's eyes suddenly widened. What? The Navy kid had no intention of dodging at all. His knees sank down, his scarred upper body leaned forward, and his eyes burst into scarlet enthusiasm. He took a deep puff of smoke, and the cigar in his mouth was visibly shorter. The dark-armed color domineering covered his hands, and he hit the oncoming sword light head-on. Bang! The magnificent sword light, which was more than 10 meters high, moved forward majestically, but Darren's feet pierced into the ground like nails, and he kept retreating, and I don't know how many towering trees he knocked down. After plowing a huge groove of 30 meters, the golden sword light slowly disappeared. Dust was flying, and the Vice Admiral of the Navy maintained the strong posture of interception, with white smoke all over his body. How is this possible? Golden Lion looked at this scene with eyes wide open, and couldn't believe his eyes. His eyes were fixed on the palm of the Navy kid. Except for a faint white mark, there was no wound at all. Although his slash was not wrapped with domineering, it was definitely not so that there was no scar at all. The same slash was obviously effective all the way here. Even the flying squirrel who had already retreated to a distance was dumbfounded by this scene. The slash of the great swordsman was intercepted by bare hands just like this. Really? Amid the dust, Darren's faint voice echoed in the air. He slowly exhaled a stream of smoke. The smoke was like a dragon, almost covering the air in front. It seems that you still don't understand the situation, Golden Lion. Darren slowly raised his head, with an unbridled arc on his lips. Now it's not you who is hunting me, but me who is hunting you. Tear. A military uniform that had long been tattered was torn into pieces by him. Life is returned. The strong body with scars crisscrossed was suddenly fully presented in front of Golden Lion. An unprecedented shock surged into his eyes. The body of the Navy kid seemed to have undergone some strange changes. The hideous wounds on his body kept closing, the bleeding stopped, and every muscle showed a perfect burst form, flowing with a wisp of cold and hard light. A demon-like terrifying aura began to rise in Darren's body. It seemed that the fragile and broken flesh and blood body before was all an illusion, and, illusion, under the suppression of life returned. This exaggerated defense comparable to Diamond is his real physique. The Golden Lion was suddenly stunned. How is this possible? Seeing the strange scene happening to the Navy kid in front of him, his eyes turned blood red, and a huge wave of emotions rose in his heart. Indestructible body. This is definitely an indestructible body. I am definitely not wrong. The cultivation of the human body is the most difficult, especially the basic qualities of the body such as pure strength, physique, speed, and explosive power, which have a physiological limit for humans. When the physical training reaches a certain level, it will no longer increase. Unless you have special blood, genes and methods. And so on. Methods. Indestructible body. Golden Lion suddenly remembered the ruins of the arsenal he saw when he reached an arms deal with Kaido in Wano country. That little Navy kid came, but I didn't let him have an easy time either. Kaido said this to him with a grin. At that time, he didn't take it seriously, but now that he thinks about it, Kaido's expression seems to be a little off when he said this. Could it be? I was tricked by Kaido. Golden Lion seemed to realize something, and his eyes were about to burst and he let out a shrill roar. Damn Kaido. Add more, ask for everything, thank you. Chapter 115 Burial Place. This little Navy kid is very likely to have cultivated an indestructible body when he was making trouble in Wano country. Although he didn't know what method he used to cultivate, at least this was something Golden Lion could be sure of. This also meant that Kaido, that bastard, deliberately concealed the true strength of Darren from him. Boundless anger surged from the chest of Golden Lion at this moment. He stared at the Vice Admiral in front of him, and gradually had a bad premonition in his heart. No. It can't be delayed any longer. This Navy kid has cultivated the Vajra indestructible body, which also means that his previous injuries were all fake. The most important thing is that his current state is extremely bad. It is no longer possible to kill this kid in a short time. Although Golden Lion is not good at physical and strength training, he has seen pigs run even if he has not eaten pork. He and Kaido were both members of the Rocks Pirates. Even in the years after the Battle of God Valley, he had contact with Kaido many times and was very clear about the thorny and difficult aspects of the Vajra indestructible body. Once cultivated into the Vajra indestructible body, the physical strength and defense will reach a level that ordinary people can't imagine. Only high-intensity armament hockey that has reached internal destruction can break the defensive hardness of the Vajra indestructible body. If you want to really threaten the life of the indestructible body, either the attack method itself has extremely high destructive power, or you have to master the entanglement of Conqueror's hockey. And now, because of the storm, a rudder has been inserted into his head, which hurts slightly, and even compresses some nerves, making it impossible to use Conqueror's hockey. But just when the Golden Lion was about to retreat, Darren took decisive action. Boom! The ground under his feet collapsed into slag in an instant, and the figure of the Vice Admiral of the Navy shot out from the spot like a bursting shell. The speed instantly climbed to the extreme. The Golden Lion's pupils shrank. What a fast speed. This is pure physical explosive power. What on earth has this kid experienced? The physical strength is not inferior to that of the giant warriors, and there is this extraordinary speed. At the critical moment, the Vice Admiral of the Navy has come to his side in an instant. 5 fingers put together to form a dragon claw, the 3 black claws broke through the air, tearing open a series of black air waves, and grabbed the head of the Golden Lion. Dragon Claw. Dang. The Golden Lion raised his 2 swords from bottom to top, blocking Darren's dragon claws. The collision between the two erupted a terrifying air wave, and the ground under his feet cracked into countless cracks. Sparks flew, illuminating the arrogant smile of the Vice Admiral. You chased me for a day and a night, and cut me all over my body. Now you want to run away, isn't it too good to think, Golden Lion? The Golden Lion's eyelids jumped, but he suddenly laughed arrogantly. Ha 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 ha. The right hand holding the sword suddenly hooked his fingers. The ground suddenly bulged with several stone pillars, which turned into huge spikes and pierced Darren's face, neck and chest. Bang! The stone pillar suddenly shattered, and countless slags flew everywhere, but they failed to leave any trace on Darren. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Golden Lion retreated instantly, trying to distance himself. However, Darren's reaction was faster than him. The dragon claws covered with dark armed color domineering grasped his 2 swords tightly at the same time. Under the effect of the diffusion of the magnetic field, the blades of the 2 famous swords, Sakura 10, and Dead Wood, were surrounded by weak arcs of electricity. Golden Lion only felt a strong dragging force coming, and for a while he couldn't break free from Darren's hands. His face froze, and he raised his head, and what caught his eyes was the grim smile of the Vice Admiral of the Navy. Flying Squirrel. He grinned. Golden Lion's pupils contracted. Could it be? 50 million volts Thunder Dragon. A cold voice came from the sky. The dazzling lightning instantly illuminated the sky. The Golden Lion opened his eyes and saw that the Navy kid with the thunder fruit was bursting with boiling lightning all over his body, and raised his hand and waved it. A huge thunder dragon, like a lifelike legendary creature, suddenly roared up, opened its scalding thunder mouth, and fell from the sky with a bang. You lunatic! The Golden Lion roared with his eyes about to burst. Darren, the Navy kid, actually wanted to rely on his indestructible body to endure the roar of the Thunder Dragon with him. The Thunder Dragon roared down and instantly sank into the earth. The world was silent for a moment. Then, boom! A shocking explosion broke out at the point where the huge Thunder Dragon landed. The surging air waves flashing with arcs spread out in all directions, the earth was lifted up like waves, and large pieces of rocks and trees were uprooted. The whole island trembled violently at this moment. Endless black smoke rose into the sky and lingered. The next second, two figures covered with black smoke shot out from the center of the explosion at the same time and fell to the ground. Darren casually extinguished the remaining flames on his body, his face was stained with a faint gray and black, and his eyes flashed with coldness. Damn! The Golden Lion stood up shakily, staring at the Vice Admiral of the Navy not far away with an unbelievable look on his face. How come lightning has no effect on you? His body was all burnt black, his long golden hair like a lion's mane was burnt black and curled, and blood was flowing out of his mouth. Golden Lion couldn't believe his eyes. Even if he had an indestructible body, he couldn't take the lightning strike so easily. Darren smiled and said nothing. The figure had rushed out again. He was the one who developed the thunder fruit of the flying squirrel, and Darren even used the thunder fruit's attack to temper the strength of his body. How could the lightning strike just now work? Get out of my way! Golden Lion roared with red eyes, and his two swords came out at the same time, slashing out dozens of golden sword beams in succession. Lion Chikiri Valley. Boom! The sharp sword beams all sank into the earth, stirring up countless smoke and dust. Golden Lion didn't even look at it, and directly activated the Devil Fruit ability, floating his body, and soaring into the sky. It was too uncomfortable. He had never fought such an uncomfortable and aggrieved fight in his life. He had to keep his armed color-domineering state covered at all times to protect the rudder. After a day and a night of pursuit, his physical strength had been exhausted. Now he had to face Darren, the invincible bastard. If he continued to be entangled and delayed like this, he might really die here. This is the North Sea. Who knows what tricks this Navy kid has? Swish! A shrill black light broke through the air in an instant. Momo katakana middle dot tenfold slash. Yan Mo. Golden Lion's face changed slightly, and he blocked Yan Mo's attack with both swords. Yan Mo's pitch-black blade tip was close at hand, and the tail was shaking due to the exaggerated impact force. Your reaction has slowed down, Golden Lion. A sneer sounded behind him. If I'm not mistaken, your observation hockey has already lost its effect, right? Golden Lion's mind was shaken. Before he could react, a three-fingered black dragon claw had already cut through the air and pierced through the back of his head. Damn it! Golden Lion roared. Years of experience in fighting in the sea made him subconsciously turn his head to avoid Darren's claw, and at the same time, he turned around and slashed with a knife. Clang! The dragon claw grabbed the blade of Golden Lion, but the tip of the blade covered with hockey still cut deeply into Darren's abdomen. As if he didn't feel the pain, Darren pressed down with one hand expressionlessly, his body turned over in midair, and his right foot spun and raised high. A kick like a battle axe hit Golden Lion's back heavily. Bang! Golden Lion spat out blood from his mouth, and the whole person fell into the ground like a cannonball, smashing a huge pit with a diameter of up to 100 meters. The ground kept shaking, and dust fell. "I won't let you escape, Golden Lion." Darren's figure fell to the ground again, frowning. Blood gushed out from his abdomen. Even if he couldn't use the Conqueror's haki, Golden Lion's swordsmanship was still so strong that it made people palpitate. With the Ryuo wrapped around it, it was enough to break through his, Vajra indestructible body, defense. Hee hee. At this time, Golden Lion's hoarse, low laugh like a devil slowly came out from the dust. Ha 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 ha. Jaya ha ha ha. His laughter went from low to high, becoming sharper and finally crazy. "If I want to leave, no one on this sea can stop me. Isn't it the same in the Battle of Marineford?" He walked out of the huge pit step by step, holding the bloody double swords. Darren looked at him quietly and suddenly sighed. "Yes, that's the fact." Her tone was filled with helplessness. "If you want to escape, I can't stop you." Darren suddenly changed the subject. "That's why I chose this place as your burial place." He looked in another direction. "Dover, leave it to you." "Yes, Godfather." A low and defiant laugh came from that direction. Golden Lion was stunned. Then his face changed drastically, as if he had seen something horrifying and terrifying. White silk threads all over the sky, from the direction where the sound came from. Soared into the sky. Chapter 116 Birdcage. "What is that?" Golden Lion widened his eyes, and a look of astonishment flashed in his eyes. Bundles of white silk threads intertwined with each other, like a huge fountain, rising quickly into the sky from the place where the sound came from. From a distance, it seemed as if a white volcano erupted, continuously spewing into the sky. After climbing to the highest point above the island, thousands of white silk threads covered the sky of the island like a meteor shower and began to fall rapidly in all directions. Although he didn't know what these white silk threads were, at this moment, Golden Lion inexplicably felt a bone-chilling chill that surged from the soles of his feet, quickly rushed up his spine to his brain, and made his scalp numb. He didn't know what was going on, but he was sure that he couldn't stay on this island any longer. He had to leave the island before those white silk threads fell to the ground. The moment the thought came up, Golden Lion took action immediately. "However, I told you not to think about running." The sharp explosion sounded infinitely close behind him, and Golden Lion's heart jumped violently, and he turned around and slashed with a knife. Dang! The famous sword stuck to the dragon claw that was torn down, and a large number of sparks splashed out. "Get out of my way. I'm not in the mood to play with you." Golden Lion roared with eyes wide open, slashing with both swords. As the slashing came like a storm, Darren sneered and went for it. Head-on fight. The famous sword slashed blood, and the claws tore the skin. Golden Lion's slashing with armed color domineering could break Darren's, Vajra indestructible body, defense. But at the same time, his flesh and blood body could not stop Darren's dragon claws that crushed everything. Swish. Sakura 10 slashed Darren's side abdomen, cutting a blood groove. The dragon claws brushed the Golden Lion's cheek, and blood gushed out of the claw marks. The eyes of both of them were bloodshot. Flying squirrel. Darren shouted. 30 million volts, group thunder. The flying squirrel, who had already flown high in the sky, had already found a good output position. He gritted his teeth, veins bulged on his forehead, and opened his arms. It was clear that he had already pushed the devil fruit ability to the extreme. Dozens of blue lightnings were released from his body in succession, and beams of lightning madly covered the two figures fighting on the ground. With Darren's physical defense and lightning resistance, the flying squirrel could launch a reckless bombardment without any scruples, without the need to aim at all. Boom, boom, boom. The group lightning exploded large groups of fire on the ground, raising large clouds of dust. The next moment, the Golden Lion, with a charred body and swirling flames, rushed out of the explosion like a madman, and rushed towards the edge of the island at a very fast speed. The white line in the distance had fallen more than half, and was less than 10 meters away from the ground. The bloodshot eyes of the Golden Lion bulged out of his eye sockets, staring at the front, blood constantly flowing from the corners of his mouth, and he was running madly. "I can catch up. At my speed, I can definitely catch up." A ray of hope lit up in his eyes, and the corners of the golden lion's mouth subconsciously raised a cruel smile. As long as I can successfully escape from this island and find a place to recover from my injuries, I can come back at any time and kill them all. That Navy kid has cultivated an indestructible body, and is indeed very difficult to deal with. But that's just because my current state is too bad. It's okay. As long as I can leave this island. The golden lion's eyes are full of violent red light. 10 meters. 5 meters. 3 meters. Closer. The arc of the golden lion's mouth is getting stronger and stronger. I can escape. 1 meter. Ha 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 ha. He laughed subconsciously, but at this moment, a fierce wind burst behind him, and a dark three-fingered dragon claw suddenly emerged from the rolling dust, and firmly grasped the right foot of the golden lion. What? The golden lion's smile stopped abruptly, his blood-red eyes bulged, and his face was full of indescribable unwillingness. His right foot was yanked hard by that hand, and his body suddenly stagnated. He could only watch the countless white lines that were close at hand fall into the edge of the island. Silently. No. The golden lion screamed with his eyes about to burst, almost biting his teeth, and slashed fiercely behind him with both knives. Swish. The shrill knife light cut a cross scar on Darren's chest, and blood splashed up. Darren's hand was also forced to let go of the golden lion's foot because of this knife. After forcing the damned Navy kid back with one sword, Golden Lion suddenly turned around and slashed heavily at the white silk thread that covered the entire island in front of him with both swords. However, an unbelievable scene appeared. Kang. The attack, which was wrapped in armed color domineering and could even break the defensive, Vajra indestructible body, fell on the white silk thread, but it was completely motionless, only a few sparks were splashed. Golden Lion's eyes widened, and he couldn't believe his eyes. He raised his head and looked along the white line of sight, and his spine was cold. The entire island has been completely covered, leaving no gaps, like a huge birdcage, giving people a terrifying feeling of suffocation. There is nowhere to escape. The whole world suddenly became unusually quiet at this moment. Tick 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 answer. The sound of blood dripping on the ground was extremely clear. Did you see it, Golden Lion? Darren stood up shakily, blood flowing down his chest. His face was slightly pale, but his eyes were filled with inexplicable pleasure, grinning. This birdcage is the grave I prepared for you. Ying almost let him escape. At this time, a rebellious sneer came from midair. Doflamingo, wearing a pink feather coat, hooked his hands with invisible silk threads, and fell steadily from the air behind him, standing next to Darren. Godfather. Is this the legendary pirate, Golden Lion Shaki? Doflamingo, wearing sunglasses, stuck out his tongue, licked his cracked lips, and laughed sinisterly. He was so excited that his whole body was shaking. This is Golden Lion Shaki. The pirate standing at the top of this sea. The legendary big shot. What, world destroyer, Bondi Waldo is not even worthy of carrying shoes for the Golden Lion. If it weren't for Darren's arrangement, I'm afraid I won't be able to fight such a strong man in the next 10 years. Not to mention being able to bury him in his own birdcage with my own hands. Don't stand too close, Dover. Darren smiled and narrowed his eyes. A lion forced into a desperate situation is very dangerous. Chapter 117 He is my godson. Damn kid. The Golden Lion's bloodshot eyes stared at Darren and Doflamingo in front of him, and his hands holding the two swords clenched tightly, with veins on the back of his hands bulging and his finger bones white. He finally understood it thoroughly now. Since the news that Roger has clues to ancient weapons spread in the underground world, all this was a trap set by Darren against him. First, use a piece of hard-to-tell true from false news to divert his attention and make himself trouble Roger. Then, when the war between him and Roger broke out in the New World, he used the kid Drago who defected from the Navy to create an unprecedented sea storm and destroy his invincible fleet in one fell swoop. Continuously stimulate and provoke himself with words, making him gradually lose his mind, and thus lose control and perception of his observation hockey. Pretend to be seriously injured, take himself around the sea in the New World, consuming his physical strength. Finally, led himself to the planned island in the North Sea, used the devil fruit ability of the blonde kid to block the island, and block his last escape route. What a good plan. Golden Lion suddenly took a deep breath. He lowered his head, and his messy, burnt golden hair covered half of his face, looking particularly gloomy and terrifying. It seems you have figured it out. Darren wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and said lightly. Golden Lion Shaki, the legendary pirate, the most troublesome pirate on this sea, known as the hardest to defeat pirate, no one else. If it were another pirate, I really wouldn't have to use so many means. But you are too difficult to deal with and too dangerous. Too much combat power, you will run away. Not enough combat power, you will be killed. Unless you take the initiative to die, there is no one who can completely keep you. Birdcage. This is the ultimate blow. After Darren's special training for Doflamingo, he had successfully mastered the birdcage at that time. This is the insidious trick used by Doflamingo to slaughter the entire island in the original plot, but in Darren's view, the greatest strategic value of the birdcage is not large-scale massacre, but confinement. Once you enter the range of the birdcage, even a strong Admiral-level fighter cannot escape from it. The silk thread used by the birdcage to block the island seems to have some special rules, which cannot be cut or destroyed. In the original plot, even if Zoro and Fujitora, as well as countless Navy and pirates joined forces, and even used armed color domineering, they could not destroy the birdcage. It can only barely slow down the closing speed of the birdcage. Such an exaggerated restriction ability is perfect for dealing with a cunning and flexible guy like Golden Lion. Golden Lion glanced at him and suddenly laughed strangely. Ha 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 ha. So Darren kid, are you so confident that you can really kill me? He glanced at the birdcage covering the entire island in the sky seemingly casually, and then his eyes suddenly burst into a violent light. I am Golden Lion Shaki. As soon as the voice fell, Golden Lion attacked brazenly. With two swords swinging, two huge golden sword arcs suddenly broke through the air and shot straight at Darren. Darren was not to be outdone, his arms were wrapped with armed color domineering, and he rushed head-on. Boom! A huge explosion rose into the sky, and a purgatory-like wind spread. The next moment, the figure of the Golden Lion turned into a golden shadow, shooting out from the dust at a very fast speed, and the target. It turned out to be Doflamingo. Ha 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 ha. Although this so-called bird cage seems to be unbreakable, as long as this blonde kid is killed, this thing will disappear. Golden Lion is worthy of being the top pirate in this sea. He saw the weakness of the bird cage at a glance. That is the devil fruit ability user himself. The flying lion swooped over the ground, and in a flash it had arrived in front of Doflamingo, grinning and slashing it with a knife. Die, little devil. This level of battle is not something you can participate in at all. Doflamingo's face was horrified. At this moment, an unprecedented sense of death threat came with the raising of the sharp sword. The terrifying murderous intent of the man in front of him seemed to turn into bone-chilling cold, completely freezing the surrounding space and suffocating people. Doflamingo finally realized what kind of terrible monster Darren was fighting with. No! He suddenly roared with red eyes, and bent the fingers of both hands into the shape of chicken claws at the same time, and raised them with force. Countless intertwined silk threads in the void gathered into a huge white spider web, stretching in front of him. Spider's nest. Clang. The Golden Lion slashed it with a knife. The blade, with its sharp and domineering aura, plunged fiercely into the spider web's silk mesh, slashing out a large number of sparks. However, an incredible scene appeared. The momentum of the Golden Lion's sword was only blocked by the spider's nest. After a moment's delay, it dragged the silk of the mesh and slashed down again. No. A touch of despair surged in the young Doflamingo's heart. Is he going to die here? He subconsciously closed his eyes. Kang! A sharp explosion suddenly sounded. The expected excruciating pain of being cut off by a sword did not appear. Doflamingo opened his eyes again, and the scene that came into his eyes made him stunned. In the reflection of the sunglasses, a wild and tall black-haired figure had appeared beside him at some point. The dark and cold three-fingered dragon claw, like an iron clamp, tightly grasped the golden lion's sword, splattering sparks. The tip of the famous sword was only a few centimeters away from his heart. "When we adults fight, we shouldn't involve children, Golden Lion." The black-haired man raised a ferocious smile. Blood oozes out of his palm and drips onto the ground. Darren raised his head and grinned. "He is my godson." After saying this, without waiting for Doflamingo to react, Darren kicked him away without even looking. Doflamingo was shot back hundreds of meters like a cannonball before crashing heavily into a boulder on the edge of the birdcage. A blood mark oozed from the corner of his mouth, and he stared blankly at the tall figure in the distance who was fighting wildly with Golden Lion. His eyes under the sunglasses became extremely complicated. "That is not a battle we can participate in." The figure of the flying squirrel gathered into a human figure by countless lightning beside him, and said in a deep voice. He extended his hand to Doflamingo. Doflamingo hesitated for a moment, then stood up again with the hand of the flying squirrel. "Does he, Godfather, have any other cards?" The flying squirrel smiled but said nothing. Just raised his hand and pointed to the sky. "What do you think?" Doflamingo was startled, and then seemed to realize something. His face changed slightly. Chapter 118 Fire at Me. The smoke and dust were flying, and the earth was turbulent. The sky on the deserted island became more and more gloomy, and the air was filled with a strong smell of blood. "Navy Kid, I'm going to kill you. You talk too much nonsense, Golden Lion." Boom. The two figures collided on the ground like a meteor hitting the earth, and the collision of the armed color domineering erupted a huge storm, spreading wildly with the two as the center. The earth seemed to have turned into an ocean, stirring up countless flying sand and rocks. "Do you think you can kill me by trapping me here?" Golden Lion's eyes were bloodshot as he slashed down with his sword. Darren's eyes were surging with scarlet light, and his observation hockey had predicted the trajectory of Golden Lion's slash, but his body did not make any evasive movements. Swish! The famous sword tore through flesh and blood, and cut out a large piece of blood mist. Darren took a step back expressionlessly, and stepped heavily on the ground with his right military boot, turning up a large piece of mud. With the help of the recoil force, he attacked Golden Lion's heart with a claw. Dang! The powerful claw was blocked by Golden Lion's horizontal sword, and the surging wind and waves erupted again. The three-finger dragon claw slashed along the blade, and sparks flew, tearing a blurred piece of flesh and blood on Golden Lion's abdomen. Golden Lion groaned. The two quickly separated by several meters. Without taking a breath, they fought towards each other again. Bang! In the distance, Flying Squirrel and Doflamingo looked at the two fighting figures in shock, and their hearts seemed to be stirred by huge waves. The two guys were like crazy, attacking each other's vital points with every move. Each confrontation left bloody injuries on each other's bodies, almost completely giving up defense, and adopting a brutal fighting method of exchanging injuries for injuries. This is a real fight. It was like two beasts with bloodshot eyes, using this birdcage as a huge jungle arena, fighting to the death. Looking at the bloody and tragic scene, Doflamingo swallowed a little uneasily, spit. Although he had experienced a miserable life since childhood. Blood, abuse, contempt, killing. But he had never seen this kind of primitive way of fighting in his life. It seemed that all actions were driven by the instinct of fighting. Even if the body was severely injured, it would tear off a piece of the opponent's flesh and blood. Doflamingo seemed mature, but after all, he was just a kid of 14 or 15 years old. Where had he seen such a scene? "Don't be stunned, I'll go get ready." The flying squirrel frowned tightly, and his eyes were gloomy. Judging from his eyes, Darren was not in an advantageous position at this moment. This was the most terrifying thing. The observation hockey was invalid, the physical strength was almost exhausted, the conqueror hockey could not be used, the rudder was stuck on his head, and he was unconscious. Even in such a bad state, the Golden Lion could still fight Darren equally. There was even a little bit of suppression. Even if Darren was not in his prime now, it was too unbelievable. If Darren had not relied on the ruling power of his indestructible body, but an ordinary mortal body, he would have been torn to pieces by the mad lion. Don't get affected later. After the flying squirrel said this, his figure turned into a blue lightning and flew into the sky, passing through the gap of the birdcage and disappearing into the clouds. Don't get affected. Doflamingo was stunned for a moment. He raised his head and looked at the dark sky. Suddenly, he seemed to see something incredible, and his eyes under the sunglasses gradually widened. Ha 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 ha. Did you see that, Darren? Although your strength has improved rapidly and you have already entered the ranks of top combat power, it's still too early to kill me, Shiki the Golden Lion. The Golden Lion laughed with bloodshot eyes. Yakuru 10, and Deadwood, two rare swords in the world, wielded a terrifying storm, slashing like a storm to cover the figure of the Navy Vice Admiral. Blood foam continued to increase in the body of the Navy Vice Admiral, and dispersed into a faint blood mist under the blowing of the wind. Clang! Swish! Suddenly, the Golden Lion's attack suddenly stopped. While the two swords slashed into Darren's chest muscles at the same time, he was held tightly by both hands. Huh! The Golden Lion's eyes condensed. The Navy Vice Admiral in front of him raised his head breathlessly, and laughed with blood in his mouth. This kind of thing. His eyes burst into a fiery light. Of course I know. So, I have prepared a surprise for you. Surprise? What surprise? Golden Lion was stunned. Boom. A dull roar gradually came from the distant sky. Golden Lion subconsciously raised his head and looked in the direction of the sound. The scene he saw made him feel like he was struck by lightning. The roar became louder and louder, and finally became deafening. A huge shadow gradually appeared in the sea of clouds. First, a huge bow slowly broke through the clouds and gradually emerged. It was a streamlined steel warship. The bow was similar to the style of the Navy's warships, but the hull structure was made of special metal, and there were wisps of cold light on the surface. There was an exaggerated chimney in the middle of the hull, and blue electric light was constantly flashing in it. Various heavy guns were placed on the bow, sides of the hull, and the deck of the warship, exuding a frightening smell of gunpowder, looking like a small war fortress. 1, 2, 3. One after another, warships poked their heads out from behind the thick sea of clouds. A full 15 flying warships lined up in the sky, forming an oppressive fleet, overlooking the island below from a high position. The dazzling white seagull flag fluttered freely above each warship, stirring up endless iron and blood. In the horrified eyes of the Golden Lion, under the unbelievable expression of Doflamingo, a dense crowd of naval elites appeared from the deck of the warship, led by the North Sea Admiral Flying Squirrel, staring at the island below with a cold look. Then, swish! Nearly 20,000 elite soldiers of the North Sea Navy raised their hands and saluted at the same time with solemn faces. All members of the North Sea Fleet. Meet Vice Admiral Darren. Golden Lion's pupils suddenly shrank into pinholes. This is the Flying Fleet. Darren, this kid, actually secretly formed a flying fleet. How is this possible? Do you know it? This is your inspiration. Golden Lion. Darren smiled. You are looking for death. Golden Lion roared and tried to draw out his two swords, but Darren's arms burst out with the transcendent power of the giants, tightly restraining his two swords. For some reason, he felt a piercing chill surging from his heart. North Sea Fleet, everyone has an order. A shocking blood mark oozed from the corner of Darren's mouth. He stared at the Golden Lion in front of him. In the eyes of the latter, he grinned. Fire at me. Chapter 119 The Demon-Killing Order from the North Sea. Fire at me. Darren's words made the Golden Lion's eyes suddenly widen, and his bloodshot eyeballs popped out of his eye sockets. As the order was issued coldly, there was no hesitation at all. The North Sea Fleet, which had been dormant for many years, had 15 heavy warships armed to the teeth, and hundreds of various heavy artillery. Adjusted their directions at the same time, aiming at the two figures on the ground. The Flying Squirrel, who had already raised his arms to make an attacking gesture, had a fierce look in his eyes and swung it down fiercely. Boom! 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 Hundreds of heavy artillery on the warships madly spewed out hot flames. Countless legends, a series of black shells. Small missile cannons with flames trailing behind them. Metal shells propelled by electromagnetic force. At this moment, it turned into a rain of fire all over the sky, pouring down on Darren and Golden Lion like a storm through the cracks of a birdcage. Almost covering the sky and the sun. Doflamingo's eyes shrank into needles under his sunglasses, and his figure subconsciously retreated quickly, directly to the edge of the birdcage. As if he was afraid of being affected by the continuous bombardment, he kept pulling and pulling countless silk threads, quickly forming a giant white cocoon, completely wrapping his body in it. White thread, giant cocoon. Just at the last second when the white line cocoon completely enveloped his body, the overwhelming bombardment finally covered him, and the flames completely submerged the cocoon. The most terrifying thing is that, in addition to the high-end military technology weapons from Germa 66, such as small tracking missiles and magnetic propulsion heavy artillery, the 15 specially modified flying warships of the North Sea Fleet are also equipped with the latest light laser cannons developed by the Navy Science Department, which are far from being officially put into use. Accompanied by countless shells and missiles dragging traces of bombing, beams of golden lasers are also pouring down from the main guns of the warships. Boom! Boom! Accompanied by the earth-shaking roar, endless flames spread out on the land of the deserted island. The vast flames shot up into the sky, the land of the island was blown up and collapsed, small peaks were flattened, and countless trees were burned to ashes in the explosion. Everything that came into view seemed to have turned into a purgatory on Earth. This was the firepower coverage from the North Sea Fleet. A sweeping attack. On the warships of the North Sea Fleet, a group of North Sea Navy officers stared in amazement at the island below that was shaking and turning into a sea of fire, with shock on their faces. Although they were also members of the North Sea Fleet, this was the first time they had seen with their own eyes the terrifying firepower of this fleet that had been hidden by Vice Admiral Darren for a long time. It can be said without hesitation that although they had not seen with their own eyes the exaggerated power of the legendary Demon Slayer Order of the Navy headquarters, the battlefield dominance displayed by their North Sea Fleet at this moment was definitely beyond the Demon Slayer Order. After all, the firepower configuration on each warship of their North Sea Fleet had exceeded that of the Demon Slayer Order warships of the same level. Report to Admiral Flying Squirrel, the energy of the laser cannon has been exhausted. A messenger rushed over nervously, panting. Don't hesitate, keep bombarding. Flying Squirrel looked down at the turbulent island below with a cold look and clenched his fists. In addition, he paused, a look of determination flashed in his eyes, and he gritted his teeth and said, "Use that." Hearing this order, the Navy soldiers looked horrified. But Vice Admiral Darren, Flying Squirrel interrupted him coldly. This is also part of Darren's plan. Yes, Admiral Flying Squirrel. The Navy soldiers all raised their hands to salute and immediately turned around to execute the order. 2 seconds later, 2 holes suddenly appeared on the metal surface of the side of the hull of the North Sea Fleet's main battleship, and 2 burst heavy machine guns protruded from them. Da 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 da. The heavy machine guns fired at the same time. However, what these heavy machine guns fired were not traditional gunpowder lead bullets, but polished black ore particles. Listening to the roar of the 2 heavy machine guns, a layer of cold sweat oozed from the palms of the Flying Squirrel. At this time, we can only believe that Darren's indestructible body is really hard enough. The Flying Squirrel's cold shout interrupted the thoughts of the Navy soldiers. The frequency of the bombardment became more intense. From their perspective in the sky, the island covered by the birdcage was full of surging flames, and the earth was even visible to the naked eye. 1 minute. 3 minutes. 5 minutes. For a full 5 minutes, the North Sea Fleet bombarded the island for 5 minutes, and this military strike that exceeded the power of the Demon Slayer Order gradually stopped. On the warships armed to the teeth, the barrels of hundreds of heavy artillery had already emitted dark red light, and thick white smoke rose from the surface. The temperature of the barrels seemed to have risen to an extremely terrifying high temperature. Did it succeed? The flying squirrel narrowed his eyes and stared at the island surrounded by flames and black smoke, trying to search for the figures of Darren and Golden Lion. The other Navy also held their breath, not daring to breathe, and cold sweat oozed from their foreheads. At the edge of the island, the charred white cocoon slowly disintegrated and turned into silk threads scattered on the ground. Doflamingo stood up from it with a pale face, looking into the distance with a doubtful expression. The intensity of the bombardment just now was simply horrifying. Even though he was extremely far away from the center of the bombardment, the impact of the fire waves and shrapnel made him feel frightened even though he was in the giant cocoon. In the center of the island, thick smoke billowed. The strong wind blew the smoke and the flames swayed. The mottled and charred land appeared in front of everyone bit by bit. The originally high-lying area was directly flattened, and the land was bombed to sink several meters, and a huge charred pit with a diameter of about 1 kilometer appeared. A tall and unusual figure first emerged. He was naked from the waist up, revealing criss-crossing scars, and his whole body was covered with charred after the bombardment. Some of the flesh and blood with horrible wounds were inlaid with shell fragments. It was Darren. The vice admiral stood motionless in the scorched earth, and after several seconds, he suddenly made a move. "Huh." Darren exhaled a long dragon-like smoke and took a step forward. A wanton smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, his arms were open, and his hands were clenched into fists. Crackling. Countless shrapnel, gravel and metal particles were constantly falling from his body, revealing his cold and hard muscles. So tough. Lieutenant General Darren. Too strong. Lieutenant General Darren endured the bombardment almost without injury. It's incredible. The soldiers of the North Sea Fleet were stunned at first, and then they couldn't help but burst into cheers of surprise. Then, what about the Golden Lion? They quickly came to their senses, and countless eyes quickly searched in the smoke. Soon they locked onto a looming figure. I really didn't expect I would be forced to this extent by you. A hoarse voice slowly came out from the flames and black smoke. The gloomy and ferocious voice was mixed with the most resentful, hateful and angry tone in the world. It made people's scalps numb. Hearing this voice, the faces of Flying Squirrel, Doflamingo and all the Navy changed drastically at the same time, staring at the figure with black smoke all over his body in horror. Under such terrifying firepower coverage, that guy is still alive. Well, it's my birthday today, and I'll add another chapter. It will probably end tomorrow, this scene. Thank you for your patience. Chapter 120 The Last Lion's Roar. Black smoke filled the air, and the remaining flames were swaying. The charred figure on the ground was looming in the swaying fire and smoke, exuding a chilling cold feeling. Darren narrowed his eyes. The 5-minute-long ground-washing bombing of the North Sea Fleet could not have been ineffective. At least it could not have been completely ineffective. Even if Golden Lion covered his entire body with armament hockey, with his limited remaining physical strength, he could not sustain such a terrible consumption of hockey covering his entire body for 5 minutes. Once he lost the defense of armament hockey, Golden Lion's own flesh and blood body would never be able to withstand the bombardment of the North Sea Fleet. The human body's physical defense is limited. Even as strong as Garp, he was accidentally slashed by Axe King Monka while sleeping. Although it was only a skin break, it was enough to explain the problem. The same was true for Whitebeard during the Battle of Marineford. Without hockey defense, pistols, artillery, and even ordinary slashes could hurt him. Even if it was Darren himself, if he had not successfully cultivated the same level of Vajra indestructible body as Kaido, he would most likely not be able to withstand the bombardment of the North Sea Fleet that surpassed the power of the Demon Slayer Order. The hot wind blew past, and the black smoke filled with the smell of gunpowder in the air gradually dissipated. The figure of Golden Lion once again came into everyone's sight. The Navy soldiers of the North Sea Fleet seemed to have seen some horrific scene. They all took a breath and subconsciously raised their weapons and aimed at the figure. Darren suddenly raised his hand to stop the Navy from shooting. At this moment, the Golden Lion had changed drastically. The golden hair that was scattered on the ground had been burnt, and the clothes on the upper body were shattered by the bombing, hanging on the body like rags, revealing a bloody and thin body. The skin, flesh, and muscles on the body were all ulcerated, charred and blurred, and the sticky black blood mixed with the melted flesh and blood was like dark red mud, sliding to the ground in clumps. Countless bullet holes, charred marks, ulcerated skin, even the left half of his face had been blown away, leaving only the exposed eyeball bulging out, filled with scarlet and hideous bloodshot. Like a demon crawling out of hell, tragic and terrifying. The golden lion was panting heavily, with hot breath coming out of his mouth and nose, as if his whole body was twitching and shaking unconsciously because of the tragic injury. But his hand holding the knife did not tremble. Hee. A self-deprecating smile gradually appeared on his lips. The mouth that was ulcerated by the bombing revealed bloody gums as he smiled. Hee, ha ha ha, jaya ha ha ha. The low and hoarse laughter gradually became louder, and soon it resounded through the sky. As crazy as a devil, the golden lion smiled grimly at the sky with blood all over his body. I was forced to this extent. You are really amazing, Darren. You even mixed seastone in the bombing of the fleet. Aren't you afraid that you will die under the bombardment? Darren took out a cigar from his arms expressionlessly, bit it in his mouth, lit it, and took a deep puff. A lion needs to do his best to kill its prey, not to mention that you are the invincible lion in this birdcage. You are too powerful, golden lion. While speaking, Darren raised his hand, and his fingers suddenly pressed hard into a piece of flesh in his chest, and a seastone bullet was pulled out of it. Ding ding dang dang. The seastone bullet fell to the ground with a crisp sound. Darren's face turned pale, but the light in his eyes became more and more blazing. I have to take this risk. He reached out again and shot into another wound. Ding ding dang dang. One after another, bloody seastone bullets were shot out by him. Because of his indestructible body, the seastone bullets did not penetrate into Darren's body, but could only barely penetrate the flesh and blood that had been cut by the golden lion, and then all got stuck in the muscle layer. If I can't kill you this time, I'm afraid I will live in fear of you for the rest of my life. After taking all the seastone bullets out of his body, Darren's breath had become chaotic. He supported his knees with his hands and panted slightly, and his lips began to turn a sickly pale. So that's it. The golden lion looked at Darren's almost crazy action, and was stunned at first, and then laughed again. As he laughed, as if his injuries were affected, blood oozed from the corners of his mouth and body. The extensive injuries all over his body, the heavy bleeding, and the weakening of the seastone bullet embedded in his body made him feel weaker than ever before. Pain and weakness filled every cell of his body at this moment. The vision in front of him was blurred, but the pain on his forehead seemed to have disappeared strangely. Ha 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 ha, I underestimated you too much. However, the golden lion ignored it completely, just staring at the Navy kid in front of him with burning eyes. You arranged such a detailed and insidious plan, and even exposed the trump card hidden for many years. Just to kill me. The rumors on the sea are indeed correct. Compared with the Navy, you are more like a pirate. He looked at Darren with undisguised contempt. In that case, I will let you see with your own eyes. What is the horror of a real pirate? The golden lion took a deep breath and slowly raised his hand. This action made Darren's pupils shrink. It also made Doflamingo, Flying Squirrel and countless Navy officers in the distance change their faces drastically. Could it be? This thing is really in the way. Golden Lion murmured softly, and the bloody hand had already grabbed the rudder on his head. It's obviously no longer painful, damn it. His violent eyes suddenly condensed, and he grinned at Darren. Don't you always want to pull this thing out of my head? In that case, I will do as you wish. Darren's pupils shrank into needles. Golden Lion's eyes were sharp, and an unprecedented determination flashed across them. Then he used one hand to force the rudder stuck in his head. And pulled it out fiercely. Swish. The rudder dragged a sticky red blood line, drawing a sad arc in the air. The world was silent for a second. Then, boom. A terrifying aura that covered the whole sky and earth, like a landslide and sea splitting, burst out from the body of the golden lion. Countless black and red lightnings surrounded the desperate lion covered in blood, and spread out in all directions. The world in front of him seemed to become sticky, blurred, and solidified, and all colors were directly deprived. The purgatory-like wind blew in his face, and the substantial aura pressure even made the land of the entire island begin to show signs of tearing. Ha 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 ha. Come on, Darren kid. The golden lion held the knife with both hands, and the domineering aura that had been suppressed by the rudder for a long time burst out unscrupulously, laughing happily and wantonly. Don't die easily. This is the lion. The last roar. Chapter 121 The Last Blow. The earth raised huge waves, the sky shook, and the clouds were shaken and continuously collapsed. Under the impact of this terrifying wave, more than a dozen warships of the North Sea Fleet in the sky shook violently at this moment, and the horsepower of the engines was turned to the extreme, struggling to resist. The Navy staggered to the left and right, their faces pale and horrified, holding the masts and other fixed objects on the hull with both hands. Many of the weaker ones rolled their eyes and fell to the ground, fainting directly. The flying squirrel's face was extremely solemn. Under the pressure of the golden lion's momentum, his body unconsciously emitted boiling blue lightning, clearly showing a tendency to passive elementalization. This is one of the top domineering on the sea today. The spirit of dominating the world and roaring in the four seas. However, this is not over yet. In the horror of the Navy's eyes, accompanied by the full-scale burst of the golden lion's long-suppressed domineering aura, his body suddenly burst out with countless blood arrows. The seastone bullets embedded in his flesh and blood were all forced out by him under his unbridled burst of momentum. The seastone bullets cut through the air in the wind, penetrated the bloody shadows, splashed on the earth, rocks and fallen trees, and pierced countless craters. Ha 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 ha. That's the feeling. The golden lion's charred, blood-stained golden hair flew up in a mess, laughing wantonly. Blood kept pouring out of the eroded skin. Blood was oozing out of his eyes, nostrils, ears and mouth, like a miserable devil in hell, and his body gradually floated up. Without any movement from him, the land of the deserted island began to show horrifying movements. Large tracts of land were torn and lifted up. Countless rocks and trees were torn and floated in the air. All living and dead things seemed to be swept up by a tsunami-like force, and rose densely into the sky. They gathered into a majestic lion that almost crashed through the birdcage. Darren. He's going to fight to the death. When the flying squirrel saw this scene, his mind was shocked, and an extremely uneasy sense of threat surged in his heart, and he roared subconsciously. Quickly retreat. Yes, there was no need for any observation hockey. Just by judging with the naked eye, the flying squirrel could see that the golden lion was at the end of his strength at this moment. His body and flesh were constantly collapsing, and the function of his internal organs was rapidly exhausted. With such a body full of holes, plus the terrible wound caused by pulling out the rudder, there was no need to fight at all, just retreat and avoid his next attack, and they would be able to win. The golden lion was dead. Retreat temporarily and avoid the sharp edge. This is the most rational approach. However, Darren's reaction made the flying squirrel's eyes freeze, and his pupils were filled with bloodshot. On the ground, the vice admiral stood there, without moving his feet at all. He slowly raised his head. Feeling the majestic momentum of the legendary pirate standing on the top of the lion at this moment, he made a move that no one expected. The body sank slightly, the right hand pushed forward, and the left hand pulled back. The 10 fingers of both hands were put together and bent at the same time, forming a domineering 3-finger dragon claw. The dark-armed color domineering, like flowing water, entwined and dyed the sharp dragon claws black. Like a giant dragon with its body coiled up. Ready to go. This is an offensive posture. Facing the boundless pirate. Facing the last roar of the lion. Darren made the final choice. At the same time, the personal panel, whose data had never stopped rising since the Battle of Edwall, finally showed abnormal movement again. Armament hockey plus 0.91. Armament hockey strength, 70. Internal destruction. Hegemony hockey plus 2.11. Hegemony hockey strength, 70. Darren laughed wildly, and blood also oozed from the corners of his mouth. A surge of momentum turned into a red cyclone, rising around his body, stubbornly supporting a fragile barrier under the golden lion's domineering storm. Come on. Golden Lion. The smile was unruly and the eyes were wanton. The Golden Lion was shocked. A hint of doubt suddenly flashed in his eyes. "You're not going to run away, Darren." Darren grinned. "You are one of the most powerful pirates of this era, worthy of my personal hands." He took a step forward. Roar. A magnificent and heroic dragon roar seemed to sound between heaven and earth. The secret of the dragon claw fist. In the shocked eyes of the flying squirrel and other navy. The momentum exuded by Darren. The armed color domineering surging like water. The red domineering color domineering. At this moment, with the infusion and concentration of his will, strange changes began to appear. The phantom of a red dragon gradually appeared in the void, surrounding him completely. "Send you the last journey." The Golden Lion was stunned when he heard the words, and then laughed up to the sky. "Ha ha ha ha. Good." He looked down at the Vice Admiral of the Navy who was wrapped in the phantom of the blood-colored giant dragon with a burning gaze. There was no hatred, resentment, anger and contempt in his eyes. There was only a recognition of the life and death fight between the strong. The Golden Lion laughed heartily, blood flying on his body. "Strength, potential, talent, planning, layout, vision. You have far surpassed your peers, even beyond this era. Darren Kid, I recognize you. I admit I will die here today." The Golden Lion clenched his two swords, and his bloody feet suddenly exerted force. The towering lion under his feet was crushed by him and dismembered. The black and red lightning began to entangle and dance around his body. The two world-famous swords, Sakura 10, and Dead Wood, overlapped in front of him and began to dive at an astonishing speed. Momentum, madly climbing rise. Life force, annihilated madly. As the lion fell like a meteorite, the roaring black-red lightning storm completely enveloped his figure, causing the surrounding atmosphere to tremble under the heavy load, and the picture became blurred. A meteor-like blow. Bundles of black-red lightning, burning life, danced and disillusioned, and finally transformed into a golden lion phantom. The double swords wrapped with the domineering aura are the sharpest fangs of the lion. This is. Darren looked up suddenly. The last blow. Take a step forward. The blood-colored dragon that was entrenched began to show an electric effect on its surface, and under the roar of the lion. It raised its head unruly. The two attacked at the same time. The next moment. Under the horrified gazes of countless people. The flying lion roared wantonly. The soaring dragon roared freely. The two huge monsters collided in the sky. Endless light and darkness, disillusionment and collapse. They seemed to see. The two crazy figures pierced through each other. Lion ghost fang. Dragon breath. A brief silence, followed by a dazzling white light, occupying the whole world. Boom. An unprecedented impact wave swept out in an instant, and the entire island began to collapse, dismember, and tear, and the surging storm radiated dozens of kilometers away. Chapter 122 The Lion's Defeat. Marine Headquarters, Marineford. Marshal's Office. Bulu Bulu. Bulu Bulu. The calls of the military Den Den Mushi rang continuously, making the atmosphere in the office more and more depressing. Zongguo put his hands behind his back and paced back and forth anxiously. Everyone's face was gloomy, and their eyes were fixed on the Den Den Mushi that kept ringing. Ka ka. The military Den Den Mushi could not be connected and fell asleep again. Damn it. Zongguo gritted his teeth and couldn't help cursing. At this time, even with his good manners, he couldn't help but swear. This was the 12th communication they tried to contact Darren and the flying squirrel, but they couldn't successfully connect the signal every time. Based on the information in front of them, their headquarters only knew that Darren had entered the North Sea with the Golden Lion. But what happened after entering the North Sea? What backup did Darren prepare? The Golden Lion is not so easy to deal with. That guy has the most terrifying combat power in this sea, and who knows what kind of counterattack Golden Lion will launch if he is pushed to the limit. After the judgment of the headquarters, senior management, Darren's importance to the overall strategic scale of the Navy far exceeds killing Golden Lion. In other words, if Darren is to be sacrificed as a price to kill the great pirate Golden Lion, Sengoku would rather not kill Golden Lion. The future development of the Navy must not lose Darren. Unable to contact Beihai, the mood of the people present became more and more anxious. What made Sengoku most anxious and uneasy was that no matter how hard he racked his brains, he couldn't figure out what Darren was sure to take down Golden Lion. Try again, Sengoku. At this time, Gangu Kong, who had been silent and smoking a cigar, suddenly spoke in a hoarse voice. His eyes were filled with bloodshot, and his wrinkled face could not hide the fatigue. As the Admiral of the Navy, he must stay in the Navy headquarters. But in fact, since the eve of the outbreak of the Battle of Edwall, Steelbone Sora has been busy with various preparatory work for the military, and has been busy for several days and nights without closing his eyes. Yes, Marshal Sora. Zhongguo nodded and dialed the Den Den Mushi of Admiral Flying Squirrel of the North Sea again. Bulu Bulu. The Den Den Mushi called again, but this time no one had much hope. If it could be connected, it would have been connected long ago. However, at this moment. Bulu. The communication was connected. I am Flying Squirrel. A low, obviously trembling voice came from the Den Den Mushi. Swish. All the naval generals present stood up suddenly, staring at the Den Den Mushi. Sengoku rushed forward, picked up the Den Den Mushi with an extremely anxious look, and shouted with red eyes. Flying Squirrel, what's the situation with Darren? Remember, no matter what method you use, even if it costs human lives, you must bring Darren back alive. Don't let Darren die at the hands of the Golden Lion. Darren won, General Sengoku. Flying Squirrel suddenly interrupted Sengoku. What? Darren won. Sengoku was stunned in place as if struck by lightning. The other generals present all took a breath of cold air, their faces full of disbelief. Sakazuki let out a long breath, sat back in his seat, and took out a cigar. I told you, don't worry too much. Our Lieutenant General Darren is known as the Legend Terminator. Borsellino next to him smiled as if he had known it for a long time. Darren, how did he win? Waring states he didn't realize that his voice was trembling a little. Did Darren win? Did Darren really kill the Golden Lion? How could this be possible? If he hadn't heard the report from the Flying Squirrel, he wouldn't have believed it was true. See for yourself, General Sengoku. The Flying Squirrel's voice came out, and then the Den Den Mushi in front of everyone slowly emitted a hazy white light. A projection gradually appeared in front of them. Everyone's eyes froze at the same time, their mouths opened, and their eyes widened. North Sea. The white birdcage had already completely disappeared. The Flying Squirrel stood on the ruined and bumpy ground, holding a military Den Den Mushi in his hand. The North Sea fleet had already been ordered to return by him and disappeared in the distance. He stared blankly at the charred giant pit in the distance, and his mood was difficult to calm down for a long time. The thick smoke gradually dissipated. The dark and heavy clouds gradually faded away, and the light of the setting sun was like a red sword, piercing through the sea of clouds and projecting onto the mottled deserted island. The setting sun was like blood, and the whole world was filled with a desolate and magnificent atmosphere. Two blood-soaked figures stood on the barren land, and the mountains in the distance had been flattened by some exaggerated power. The light of dusk reflected their scarred bodies in blood red. The two stood face to face, motionless, like two bloody people. Tick tick tick. The sound of blood dripping on the ground broke the dead silence of the world. The blood dripped from the tips of the two intertwined swords, Sakura 10, and dead wood, and gathered into a small pool of blood at Darren's feet. The double swords of the Golden Lion pierced his abdomen and came out from his back. So, do you look down on me? Golden Lion raised his bloody and hideous face with difficulty, and a trace of uncontrollable anger appeared on his face full of dried blood. With your observation haki, you can obviously dodge my knife. Yes, Darren said hoarsely, with sticky blood oozing from the corner of his mouth. Golden Lion's last move seemed to be extremely powerful. Both the entanglement of armament haki and domination haki had exploded to the extreme. But his injuries were too serious, and he could not catch Darren's breath without his observation hockey. This also means that this knife can be dodged. Then why don't you dodge? I just simply think that the strongest two-sword swordsman in the world, the last swan song of the legendary pirate, should not fail, right? Golden Lion was stunned. He took a deep look at the vice admiral in front of him and suddenly laughed. Ha 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 ha. You have guts. He laughed so wantonly, happily, and freely. That's your magnanimity. Ha 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 ha. He laughed until he spat out blood and shed tears. That's good. It's worth dying in your hands. Darren pursed his lips and said nothing. He didn't have the strength to speak. The Golden Lion slowly raised his head, his gradually blurred eyes, looking at the sunset in the distance. In a trance. He seemed to remember a lot. Countless images flashed through his mind. Fighting, war, ambition, blood. Going out to sea, killing, rocks, Whitebeard, Linlin, Kaido. The failure of God Valley, Garp's figure. Freedom, going out to sea, galloping around the world, the invincible fleet. Dominating the sea, ruling the world. The countless gains and losses, successes and failures in his past life flashed before his eyes like a slide show, and finally stopped in the picture of a figure. Roger. Roger. In the end, I am still not as good as you. My journey is coming to an end. Your voyage is still going on. He gradually narrowed his eyes, as if he was enjoying the last dusk of his life, and a faint smile gradually appeared at the corner of his mouth. Navy kid, promise me one thing. Just treat it as a request from the loser. Golden Lion suddenly said. You said, I may not be able to do it. Darren said lightly. The Golden Lion lowered his head, staring at the two swords that pierced Darren's body, exhaled slowly, and his hands trembled. And let go. All reluctant. Although your half-baked swordsmanship is very poor, you do have the courage to wield these two swords. Promise me, let them drink more blood of strong men. Darren said simply. No problem. Their names will accompany me and resound throughout the world. The Golden Lion laughed with satisfaction. He laughed heartily. Darren said calmly. So, what are your last words? Last words. The Golden Lion smiled with disdain. I am the Golden Lion. I have no regrets in this life, why do I need last words? He opened his arms, blood flowed all over the ground, but he raised his head and laughed wildly. The tattered golden hair danced wildly in the wind. The life is about to end, but the figure is still upright, and the momentum is still high and unyielding. Like a roaring lion standing on the top of a mountain. Kill me, Navy brat. Then, reach the top of your ambition. As the Golden Lion made this move, the Denden Mushi only the people like Sengoku on the side could finally see clearly. This pirate who was the most feared by the Navy, had a hand deeply embedded in his flesh and blood at the position of his heart. That was Darren's hand. As you wish. The Vice Admiral said lightly. Swish. The sound of a broken heart suddenly sounded. A bunch of bright blood flowers pierced through the back of the Golden Lion and flew into the sky. The proudly laughing lion trembled and slowly fell backwards. In the desolate and mottled ruins. Only one person was left standing. The picture was frozen. On this day, the legendary pirate, Flying Admiral, Golden Lion Shiki, was defeated. Add more chapters, yes, I promised everyone. Golden Lion today. I admit that the Golden Lion chapter is a bit long, but I think it is worth it. He killed Marineford alone, cut off his own legs and escaped from Impel Down. This guy did what Roger and Whitebeard could not do. He is the greatest pirate hero. He deserves these roles. Chapter 123 is the Lion Swan Song wonderful. Really? Killed the Golden Lion. Marshal's office at the headquarters of the Navy. Sengoku and other naval generals looked at the frozen picture with shock, and their hearts were filled with turmoil. The conference room became silent, and you could hear a pin drop. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. Good. Great. We won. From the Battle of Etwall to now. Our Navy finally killed the bastard Shiki the Golden Lion. Vice Admiral Darren is really awesome. The naval generals were so excited that their faces flushed, and some even couldn't help cheering. At the same time, the huge stone that had been hanging in their hearts was finally put down. That was the fear brought by the flying Admiral Golden Lion. Everyone knew that if the Navy could not get rid of Golden Lion this time, it was conceivable that the Navy would most likely face crazy revenge from that guy next. With Golden Lion's revengeful character, he would never let the Navy have an easy time. There was no need for any flying pirate fleet. He only needed to float a small island and drop it over the various branches of the Navy at will, and even send a gift to the Navy headquarters Marineford from time to time, which was enough to make the Navy anxious. And now that Golden Lion was finally killed by Vice Admiral Darren, the terrifying haze hanging over everyone's head also dissipated without a trace. Everyone subconsciously breathed a sigh of relief, and then opened champagne to celebrate. In a cheerful and relaxed atmosphere, Zhongguo sat down on his seat as if he was exhausted, still in shock. He and Steel-Boned Sora looked at each other, and then both of them smiled with great emotion. We won. In this way, this magnificent Battle of Etwall came to a close with the legendary pirate Shiki the Golden Lion falling in the North Sea. In less than a day, with the promotion of the Navy headquarters and the major forces in the underground world, the news of this war spread to every corner of the world. The largest war in the world since the Battle of God Valley. Participants: Roger Pirates, Hiku Pirates, Navy Headquarters. 2 legendary pirate groups and the largest military organization on this sea, their every move is enough to attract the hearts of countless people. Not to mention that these 3 major forces broke out in such a shocking melee in the New World at Wall Sea. The ambition of Golden Lion to encircle Roger Pirates. The clues to the ancient weapon that can destroy the world. The Roger Pirates forced into a desperate situation. The sudden super-large storm at sea. The Roger Pirates comeback. The annihilation of the flying pirates. The strong military combat capability of the Navy. And the legendary pirate, the pirate overlord Golden Lion, who died in the North Sea. All these traces and news, like heavy bombs, turned the sea upside down, and made the leaders of countless forces fall into indescribable shock. And what followed was that. The eyes of everyone in the world were all focused on the young Navy. Roger's Darren, this legendary Navy that rose like the sun and established brilliant achievements time and time again, suddenly became the object of pursuit in the hearts of countless Navy in the world, and also became a nightmare for countless pirates. From this day on, the North Sea, which was once the most chaotic, became the forbidden land of pirates. And the Vice Admiral who planned the Battle of Etwall, with his title of Uncrowned King of the North Sea, Roger's Darren, officially entered the ranks of legends. New World. A certain sea area, a deserted island. The broken Oro Jackson floated on the coast, looking very desolate. The people of Roger's pirate group sat on the shore with a listless look, a bonfire was lit in front of them, and they ate barbecue listlessly. Damn Garp. He chased me for 3 days and 3 nights. Roger fiercely he tore off a piece of barbecue with his teeth, and the meat was stuck in his leaky front teeth. He muttered angrily. I owe him. Rayleigh leaned against a reef, his face was not very good, and his face was dusty. He took a sip of liquor from the wine pot and said hoarsely. Don't talk so much nonsense, Roger, hurry up and replenish your energy. We have less than an hour to rest, otherwise Garp will catch up again. I know, don't be so nagging, Rayleigh. Roger said dissatisfiedly, and stuffed another large piece of barbecue into his mouth while speaking. However, at this moment, Captain Roger. A horrified voice came from a distance. Everyone turned their heads and saw that Buggy was running towards them with his feet like a wheel. As if he had seen something horrible, he was so scared that tears and snot flowed out. His hands had been separated from his body, hanging in the air, tightly holding a newspaper. Something bad has happened. Baki ran to the crowd breathlessly, his eyes bloodshot, his whole body trembling with fear, and said in a trembling voice. Golden Lion is dead. He was killed by the Navy who took off your pants. As soon as the voice fell, the faces of the Roger pirates changed drastically. Impossible. How is this possible? Shaki is dead. They all grabbed the freshly baked newspaper in Buggy's hand with shocked expressions, and even Roger didn't care about eating meat or refuting Buggy's words, took off his pants. Pairs of nervous eyes cast at the newspaper, and then their eyes suddenly froze, and their pupils shrank into pinholes. The front page of the newspaper was bold and enlarged, with a shocking headline. The Battle of Etwall. An unprecedented storm. The legendary pirate Golden Lion Shaki fell in the North Sea. Close double-angle bracket. Below the title is a large area of war history, analysis and various reports about the Battle of Etwall. In addition, a picture was added at the end of the news report. The picture shows a desolate and ruined land. The rolling mountains and forests seemed to be flattened by some terrifying force, and there were charred and flames everywhere. Under the setting sun at dusk, a tall bloody figure stood in the center of the ruins. His abdomen was pierced by two sharp long knives, and came out from his back. But he still stood there. Everything was miserable. At the feet of the man, there was a golden lion that had fallen to the ground with a smile on its mouth. This was a battle between trapped beasts. No one knows the details, but what is certain is that after a world-shaking battle, the legendary pirate, Flying Admiral, Golden Lion Shaki, the pirate overlord with a bounty of 4.45 billion Baileys, died with a rebellious smile on his face at the hands of Vice Admiral Rogers Darren of the Navy headquarters. A new era is coming. The Navy's golden generation, headed by Rogers Darren, is constantly rising, shining like monsters like stars. This may be the era of the Navy. The Navy, which represents righteousness, is about to usher in its heyday, and where will the pirates, who represent evil, go? But I don't care about these. I only care about one question. Is the lion's swan song brilliant? Unfortunately, only that Navy knows this question. World Economic News Agency, President Morgan's. Chapter 124 Pirates Forbidden Land, North Sea. Looking at the picture in the newspaper, everyone in Roger's Pirates fell into a bottomless silence. Especially Buggy and Shanks, the two little brats, were dumbfounded and speechless. The legendary pirate, the top powerhouse who was as famous as their captain, died in the unknown North Sea. Died in the hands of that navy. The visually impactful photo in the newspaper and the tall back standing next to the body of the golden lion made them feel their pores stand up unconsciously and a chill ran down their spines. It was as if they remembered the fear of being almost killed when they first met the Navy. And the most terrifying thing now is that the Navy is getting stronger and stronger. I always feel something is wrong. We have seen the strength of that Navy brat in the Etwall Sea. Although he has become much stronger, he is definitely not able to kill the golden lion. Jabba frowned tightly and touched the stubble on his chin. Rayleigh also nodded in agreement. Even if Roger went all out, he was not sure he could take down the golden lion. It was impossible for Darren to kill the golden lion. Roger, what do you think? No one answered his question. Rayleigh was stunned, turned his head, and saw Roger sitting there quietly, holding the newspaper in his hands, without saying a word. Are you okay, Roger? Rayleigh's eyes moved slightly, and he patted Roger's shoulder. Roger was silent for a long time before shaking his head. He let out a long breath. Ski, dead. Everyone was silent for a while when they saw the complicated look on their captain's face. Although the Golden Lion was their enemy, it even forced them into a desperate situation in the Battle of Etwall. If it weren't for the sudden storm, they would probably have been buried in the sea now. But even so, I understand clearly that there is mutual recognition and sympathy between the captain and the Golden Lion. I'm fine. After a while, Roger shook his head and smiled. Shaki's journey is over, but our voyage continues. Everyone has his own adventure. And Rayleigh. He pointed to the photo in the newspaper. No matter what happened here, and what means Darren, the Navy kid, mused, I can be sure that Shaki has no regrets. Did you see it? He died with a smile. Roger paused here and looked up at the endless blue sea in the distance. A bold and unrestrained smile gradually appeared on his face. He must have experienced a hearty fight. When these words came out, everyone was shocked. Hearty fight. Could it be that the strength of that navy has entered the realm of legend? We should leave here too. Before everyone could react, Roger wiped the oil stains from his mouth and stood up. The broken front teeth had grown again. He put on the bright red captain's coat and strode towards the Oro Jackson. Let's set sail. Our last adventure is waiting for us. The sun was shining and the sea breeze was blowing. His steps were firm and his smile was shining. The crew was stunned for a moment. Boom! A cannonball suddenly exploded on the coast, causing a column of waves. Roger was so scared that he rolled and crawled, rushing towards the pirate ship as if he was escaping. Why don't you run away quickly? Garp, that bastard is coming! He shouted. Everyone. In the New World, a certain sea area. A huge pirate ship like a white whale was crawling on the sea. The sea breeze was fierce, and the skull flag with the white scimitar beard fluttered in the wind. Marco and other members of the Whitebeard pirates looked at the newspapers in their hands with solemn faces, and they were speechless for a long time. Kazuki Odin, who had one arm broken, leaned on the railing with a dejected look, and there were empty bottles scattered around him. His face was ruddy and he was already drunk. On the bow, Whitebeard twisted a pot of strong liquor in his hand, looking deeply at the distant sea. The oncoming sea breeze blew his wide white captain's coat. At a certain moment, Whitebeard suddenly picked up the strong liquor and drank it all in one gulp. It's been a long voyage, Shiki. He whispered softly. In his deep eyes, a complex sadness and, remembering flashed. 10,000 countries, Totland. Headquarters Cake Island. He's worthy of being the man I've chosen. He killed that bastard Shiki. The charming and sharp laughter came out in the castle full of cream fragrance, with a sound wave that tore the eardrums, making the big katakana mom pirates on duty around the castle pale, weak, and kneeling on the ground with a bang. The top floor of the Cake Castle. Katakuri listened to his mother's indulgent laughter, his eyebrows knitted tightly, and murderous intent and anger surged in his eyes. He gritted his teeth, took a step forward, and threw the trident earth dragon in his hand fiercely. Swoosh! The trident whistled through the air and finally sank deeply into the castle wall, with its tail shaking constantly. It nailed a newspaper that was falling in the wind. To be more accurate, it nailed the photo on the newspaper. Sooner or later, I will kill you, Rogers Darren. Katakuri roared with red eyes. Wano Country. Curry Region. Research Institute. Quinn ignored them and got on his motorcycle. His meaty body made the motorcycle whine under the heavy load. He started the engine and drove away with a rumble. Today is the meeting time for the Beast Pirates. Don't be late, or you will be beaten again. Soon, Quinn arrived at the ceremony hall of the Beast Pirates in Julie District. Walking into the Japanese-style palace, Quinn immediately noticed that the atmosphere was a little wrong. All the cadres stood there trembling, their feet shaking like sieves. What happened? Quinn quickly recalled in his mind and made sure that he had not done anything wrong recently, walked in carefully. Jin, whose face was covered by a black armor, glanced at him. You can see for yourself. He then threw a newspaper into Quinn's hand. Quinn was stunned and opened the newspaper with a puzzled look on his face. But when he saw the content of the newspaper. What? The fat man in overalls almost jumped out of his eye sockets and his mouth fell to the ground. The Golden Lion was killed by Darren. He seemed to realize something and raised his hand in a sweat. Boss Kaido, this has nothing to do with me. I know. Kaido cursed angrily, his tone was angry and there was a spark in his eyes. Hearing this, Quinn let out a long sigh of relief and laughed. But this is a good thing. Golden Lion is a trouble when he's alive. It's good to be dead. Well, it's this Darren brat. How did he kill Golden Lion? This is not right. Quinn rubbed his chin, rubbing out layers of flesh waves. Wait. He suddenly seemed to remember something, a light bulb lit up in his head, and he punched his palm with his fist, saying in surprise. I know. Boss Kaido, did you deliberately hide the boy's true strength from Golden Lion, causing Golden Lion to be tricked? Hearing this, Jin's eyes twitched. Quinn seemed to have not realized anything yet, and analyzed it by himself. Could it be that Darren Brat has become stronger because of this incident? If he comes to Wano country again, he will suffer. He suddenly felt a chill on his back. A huge shadow like a demon god has already covered his eyes. Wait, Kaido. Quinn's face changed drastically, and he retreated in fear. Zzzzzzz. The mace began to emit jumping arcs. The outbreak of the Battle of Etwall and the death of Golden Lion made the whole world more and more chaotic. Especially the death of Golden Lion, which caused a huge vacuum in the distribution of power in the New World. Countless pirates and forces, big and small, swarmed in various seas, like sharks smelling blood, trying to plunder this huge cake. However, no matter how chaotic the outside world is, there is still a sea in this world that maintains absolute peace. That is the forbidden land of pirates, the North Sea. No matter it is a country with amazing power, the insidious and cunning mafia, or a pirate with overwhelming combat power. As long as they step into the North Sea, they must abide by the rules of that man. Otherwise, only destruction awaits them. Of course, this may just be an illusory legend. The third volume, The Name of Legend, is finished.